Thank you very much. Marnie, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Leaks May.
Here.
Councilmember Martin.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Polika.
Here.
Councilmember Piana.
Here.
And Mayor Coulter.
Here, thank you. We have a quorum this evening. The next item of business would be the approval of the agenda.
Your Honor, I'd like to make the following changes to the agenda. Consent agenda item Q, which is the condolence resolution for Edward Schurig. I'd like to move to presentations as the family is here and needs to get on the road.
Excellent, okay.
And in addition, I'd like to add regular agenda item H, which is a amendment proposal relating to a skate park location.
Support.
And I'll move we accept as amended.
There is one more amendment for the Woodward, which one is it?
I was going to do that at the consent agenda.
Why don't we just put I? Oh,
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it's I.
I.
Consent agenda I,
I.
which is the approval of the agreement between Ford Motor Company and the City of Ferndale for the Dream Cruise.
can we put that as a regular agenda item?
Please.
Okay, that'll be
Item.
item I on the regular agenda, okay. From I to I, correct?
I
Yep.
to I.
All right.
Aye.
So just to be clear, we have an additional presentation, which was item Q. We have and two regular agenda item additions. H is a skate park update, and I is the Dream Cruise item. Anything else? So Councilman Martin, you moved that. Was there support?
Support.
Oh, support. All right. Marty, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Martin.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Polika.
Yes.
Councilmember Piana.
Yes.
Councilmember Leaks May.
Yes.
And Mayor Coulter.
Yes, thank you. The agenda is adopted. So why don't we move to that presentation, Councilman Martin, since we want to let these folks get on the road to somewhere nice, I hope.
Sure. We'd like to just take an opportunity to honor our former Ferndale Fire Department and engineer. I'll read the resolution. Born November 24th, 1932 in Ferndale, Edward Schurig passed away April 1st, 2019. Edward was a resident of Ferndale for over 40 years and recently resided in Merrill, Michigan. Edward joined the Ferndale Fire Department in 1961 and retired in 1985 as an engineer. Edward was preceded in death by his wife Lillian Edie Schurig, in December of 2018. He's survived by their children Eva, Russ, and Mark, along with 12 grandchildren and 20 great-grandchildren. Edward Schurig was a credit to his family and his community, and it's with deep sorrow that we mourn his loss. And I just want to personally thank the family, invite them up, and thank you for sharing your father, grandfather with us in this community. So,
Yes. Come on up. And if you have anything you want to say or add, you're welcome to do that as well. Oh, yeah, there you go. Come on up, gentlemen, sure. Not trying to, yeah, it's not required.
I'd like to just take this opportunity for my family. This resolution, it means a lot. You know, his time that he served with the city. He enjoyed his service to the city, and we appreciate his service very much.
Thank you.
And thank you very much.
Very well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Wonderful. All right, thanks, Councilman Martin. The next presentation would be our police study update, and I think the chief is going to lead that, correct?
Mayor and Council, how is everybody tonight?
Excellent.
Wonderful.
So it was 360 days ago that I was named the interim police chief, April 15th of 2018. After a series of events, the chief of police retired. I was named as the interim. Shortly thereafter, I worked with the city manager, and we contracted a company called KRW They're an outside agency that does assessments on police departments, fire departments, and various other organizations. They're from the state of Colorado. They're comprised of city managers, law professors, human resource manager specialists. So we brought them in to really do a 365-degree look at the police department, because in reality, we're kind of stuck in our own bubble and we don't know how well we're doing, so we wanted somebody to come in to kind of give us a look. What happened after that 2018 final report contained 25 recommendations. We're going to go through those briefly here and kind of talk about what direction we're headed at with each one of those recommendations. At any time throughout this, if you have a question, please just speak up and I'll answer it. Each recommendation was looked through for context and applicability and also legally, morally, and against the standards of our citizens. What you need to keep in mind is that the company that did the assessment was from Colorado, so laws do vary from state to state. So some things weren't legally permissible here in the state of Michigan. The timeline, we went from immediate to zero all the way out through 2 years, which was the longest recommendation. And we'll start right off with that. So we're going to kind of bounce around a little bit from 1 through 25 and start really at the crux of what is going to guide us through a majority of these 25. So I figured we'd get that right out of the way. Recommendation number 2 was an accreditation. An accreditation, in a nutshell, takes a professional standard and looks at almost every aspect of your police department. And with that comes standards, and with each standard comes multiple proofs. So you not only tell them what you're going to do, you're then going to have to prove it year after year that you're doing exactly what you're saying you're going to do. So a lot of these recommendations are going to bounce back to number 2, which is accreditation. There's a bunch of things that it helps as far as insurance, as far as reducing liability and lawsuits and things like that. But the real crux of it is it's really going to help us guide us on moving forward as a 21st century police department. Currently in the state of Michigan, there's 571 law enforcement agencies. There's only 16 that are accredited through the Michigan Association of the Chief of Police. There's about 26 that are in process. We're one of that 26. So we're really taking a step forward. I think you'll see that this will be a standard moving forward throughout the state and the country, that you're holding this type of accreditation where somebody's coming in from the outside, reviewing your policies, and really looking at everything you're going to do. We'll talk about a little bit more. One of the recommendations, the accreditation process is quite lengthy. It will take anywhere between 18 to 24 months, and you really need an accreditation manager to handle that. Sergeant Brown is going to move in that position starting July 1st and be our accreditation manager. Number 1 recommendation was to appoint a chief of police. That was completed September 22nd. I was named the full-time chief, and I think you made a good choice on that.
Glad you approve.
So like I said, we're going to bounce around a little bit because a lot of things stack on other recommendations. So number 12, part of the accreditation process was they talked to not only community group members, but there was a lot of internal discussions and conversations. And how is morale, and how would you like to see this police department ran? One of the recommendations was to establish a leadership advisory council. That's where you take a person from each division of the police department, you meet as needed, and then you throw them a problem, and then they help build or solve that problem from within. So we did our leadership advisory council. Captain Emmy championed that and put it together. We met for the first time on the 29th. And their first assignment was how do we assign people for special assignments. We are dictated by a lot of things through a collective bargaining agreement. Special assignments are very rare with the size of our agency. but we wanted to be able to give those in a fair manner, which in the past wasn't really felt like it was fair because the chief of police could appoint whoever he wanted in those positions. So we threw it to the Leadership Advisory Council. They came up with an agreement, which would be a panel, and then the recommendation would be made to the chief of police, and we signed an LOU with the union. So far, we've used this 3 times, with one being today, and I followed the recommendations of the board. Typically, we'll bring in somebody from the outside to help sit on that board. The number 2 recommendation was we needed mission, core, values, and vision statement. We had the mission and vision statement. They agreed with that, but we were lacking our core values. The easiest way to explain core values is when our officers go out there and make a decision, we want to make sure that they're basing these decisions off these core values. So the LAC went back to each platoon, they each gathered their 5 core values, and then when we got together, we threw them all together at the next meeting. And the 5 core values that they came up with that defines their things they do on the road in their decision-making process is integrity, service, commitment, courage, and compassion. The number 4 recommendation was continue to update our policies and procedures. We were headed in a pretty good place with that, but accreditation also is heavily policy-based, and you'll have to review those yearly, which we are doing now, but we'll have to show proofs that we're actually doing that. So each policy will be looked at yearly. Recommendation 5, 9, and 23. Number 5 was use of force training, and it's a model called the Integrated Communication Assessment and Tactics. A perfect example of this would be an officer gets called to a house where somebody's locked in a room with a knife, right? It's not a situation we need to push forward, but time after time after time, you see these videos where these officers are pushing and putting themselves in bad situations and then are being forced by their own hand to use some type of force, including deadly force. This ICAT model really takes you to look at all the information, make better decisions, give yourself better reactionary gap, and put other tools in there. So that's the first thing we started. All of our officers have done the online module, so they understand what it is. It's been gone over with the shift commanders. The second phase will be where they put it into practical scenarios this summer with our use of force team that was put together. The policy for use of force, we're revising that to incorporate the 30 PERF recommendations, which include the sanctity of life as being the core of those. So before any force is used, we have to make sure that we're keeping the sanctity of life as the number 1 priority. There's also a recommendation for, we give awards for a bunch of different things. One was they thought we should give an award for when somebody uses good tactics and de-escalates. So we created the Chief's Coin Award, and we've given a couple of those so far. Number 23 was a foot pursuit policy. Foot pursuit is viewed the same way as a vehicle pursuit. You can engage in those as long as you're informing dispatch what's going on. But the big thing is let the officers know that there are other things to do instead of just following somebody blindly behind a corner and putting yourself into a bad situation, which ultimately may lead to a higher use of force. So that's also part of the accreditation process. So that draft is in process. 6 and 13, number 6 is performance evaluation, and number 13 is assessment of property evidence section. Those are both part of accreditation, so those will be looked at and they will be mandated as part of accreditation. Some of these will take a little bit longer because performance evaluation, that is subject to collective bargaining, so we'll have to meet with the union and use the LAC and try to navigate that path. 7 and 8. Internal investigation timeline. The philosophy when I took over was that we are going to move through these internal investigations swiftly and fair. They seem to lag in the past, and I just wasn't comfortable with leaving these internal investigations hanging over officers' heads. I'd rather get them to the point and through them and getting back to work. So those have been dramatically reduced in timeline. The internal investigation database, I think that's just something they missed. We have that. Everything is digitized, so I think they just kind of missed the mark on that one. Review of critical incidents. All critical incidents on the road, whether it be a foot pursuit, a vehicle pursuit, a use of force, once that happens, it not only is reviewed at the shift level as a training tool, it's also reviewed by the use of force division and ultimately the captain, who's the patrol division commander. You all know about our fair and impartial policing policy, where we review up to 600 independently found on patrol videos of all our patrol officers yearly. So these are calls that are not dispatched, but just officer find somebody at a traffic stop or find somebody walking. We review, make sure that those are legally fair and morally justified. These are also addressed in accreditation. We have started some stress debriefs. We had 2 suicides in 2 months involving a gun. So we brought in a clinician that did a critical incident debrief for these officers to kind of relieve some of that stress and allow them a safe.
Not, just to be clear, not of our officers, but in situ.
Just things that we
residents
responded
they were
to,
responding
right, correct.
Just to be clear.
Yep. Some of the command officers felt that they weren't being heard as far as discipline with individuals that are underneath their command. So I have built into the discipline process that we will talk to everybody, every supervisor in that chain of command to get their opinion on what they feel discipline should be. Nobody knows the officer better than their direct first and second line supervisors. Recommendation number 4, creation of a professional standards section. Like we said, Sergeant Brown will take over there July 1st. He will not only be the accreditation manager, but he will be in charge of all internal investigations and handle some citizens' complaints. It takes a lot of time, and in its current form, the DB lieutenant handles that, and it really takes away from the rest of his duties. So we're going to have somebody that will handle that, and that will also speed up the timeline. Recruitment, currently we are authorized 42 officers. We are at full staff at 42, but that doesn't mean we're going to stop putting out flyers. Accreditation also has a section where we need to continuously, yearly, even if we don't need to hire anybody, continue to try to get applicants and make people aware of our department. So it'll be addressed in accreditation as well. Mentoring program, currently our FTOs are our mentors, but the reality is the shift sergeant is the mentor to the officers, the lieutenants mentor the sergeants, and it's hard to force these type of relationships. We just try to create an environment where people feel comfortable with each other and people kind of find themselves, find a mentor. We just try to continue to create leadership training, make it available for them. Our workforce is very young. 15 out of our 20 road officers are under 4 years of service, so they're incredibly young. One of the recommendations was a citizen satisfactory survey. This has been in progress for quite a while. I don't think it's on the back of every one of our business cards. Every call for service we go on, this is handed out. Everybody here in the audience, if you want to make a comment on the police department, go to surveymonkey.com/r/FPD-service. It's a real quick, takes you about 2 minutes to fill out. We had the Chiefs Roundtable, which we'll get to next. They made some other recommendations on how we're going to distribute this. We're in the process of doing that. One of the recommendations that we didn't think was really viable for us was a service delivery alternatives. Big departments will allow you to take small vehicle accidents and other minor things over the phone. we don't think that's a great fit for us. I would rather my officers come out and make that contact with the community, any chance we're not that busy, and it gives you a chance to meet our folks and us a chance to meet you as well. So that was one we're not gonna use. Recommendation 19 and 20, enhanced use of data to make strategic decisions and enhanced modification traffic enforcement. We have a sergeant that's in Staff and Command College right now. Her project for the school is to look at 19 and 20 and bring back some ideas on how do we do that and best utilize our people and deploy them strategically where they're needed at the times that they're needed. That will also be looked at accreditation. Citizens Advisory Committee, the first one took place March 12th. I think we have somebody here. No, I thought we had somebody here from the Citizens Police Academy. So we had 19 community members showed up. We discussed future projects, policies, procedures. They actually saw this presentation or a modified version of this presentation there. So it's a way for us to engage with people that have shown an active interest in the police department. And if we have critical incidents, we'll contact them, and it'll be as needed. Probably 3 to 4 times a year, we'll get these folks together. And it's nice to be able to pick up the phone and call the chief of police or send them an email. Annual report, recommendation number 24. For whatever reason, 10, 12, 15 years ago, we quit doing the annual report. I don't know why. It was above my pay grade at the time. But that was one of the recommendations that is due here from one of my new sergeants in the next week, at least the rough draft anyways. So I'm hoping to have that to everybody in the community within the next month. Detention facility, recommendation number 25, that is also be thoroughly reviewed through accreditation. That is my 25. That was down and dirty and fast. Any questions?
Yeah. So let's open it up to council. Do you have any questions of the chief?
I do.
Or
Chief,
comments?
number 25 was about staffing, 42 police officers. Is there a formula that is used to identify how many police officers are needed? Who makes that determination?
There is a national standard that goes off per capita of citizens. It also accounts for occupied time and undocumented time, so time that you have ability to go out and freelance, and other times when you're handling calls for service. So yeah, there is a formula. It'll be part of the staffing command paper in recommendation 19 or 20 and 21. So that'll all be involved. It's kind of complicated, but I could pass that along. We'll have that conversation at another time.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else?
Oh,
Go ahead.
did someone else? I'm still looking for it. Go ahead.
So I just want to say that I'm particularly excited about the Leadership Council.
Good question.
Was that it?
Keep going.
Okay. Because I think, the community should, with everything that's kind of gone on in the past with between citizen and officer relations, to have that sort of open and transparent environment will be beneficial. So I really appreciate that. And just for the record, I was at that meeting as one of the citizens, so good.
So this is your second time seeing this?
Yes, yes. And I loved it. I hope others will get a chance to do it in the future.
Well, the Citizens Police Academy, which is coming up in October, is kind of the feeder to the Chiefs Roundtable. And the reason we did that is because I wanted to make sure that you had at least a little bit of understanding on how the police department operates. So stay tuned for the next academy. We can fit 25, plan on signing up for it. It's every Thursday in October.
And through the chair, building off of the Leadership Advisory Council, how do you invite civilians from every division? What does that mean? Civilians from every division?
So we invited somebody from records, which is really our only
Okay.
civilian staff. One person from each of the
So I thought- I wanted to
platoons,
make sure.
one person from the detective bureau, one person from the sergeant rank, one person from the lieutenant rank. So we try to get a representative from every population that we have at the police department.
Great.
There's only 50 of us, so.
make a comment. I just really appreciate the due diligence and pushing these recommendations forward and doing implementation. I think for me, from the survey to the Citizens Advisory Council, to the Police Academy, to this Leadership Advisory Council, and the Chiefs Roundtable, there are many layers of how to get residents' concerns heard and heard by leadership of the police department. And I think that's a really, I guess I see it as a big change of how a resident can make sure that their concerns are adequately addressed and benchmarked against these accreditation principles that we are adopting. And so I really look forward to getting accreditation in 24 months.
A perfect example is we had a citizen complaint which led to an internal investigation which led to a few days suspension. I called the lady that made that complaint today and advised her of the final outcome. So at every step in these events that happen, we're keeping the complainants involved, which I'm not sure how much that happened in the past, but.
I think what I've heard over the years is that residents are not sure what happens to their complaint and does it actually go anywhere. And it did go somewhere and it was addressed, but I don't think it was this clear process for residents to understand of how it will be discussed and approached and clearly vetted. So the clarity of this whole process is what I am, on behalf of our residents and business owners, is what I really like.
Well, I've said from day one that I'm extremely accessible. You can stop by and see me. You can send me an email. You can call my office line. And if I've ran into you personally, I've given you a business card with my cell number on it. I'm accessible. If you need something, I'd rather you pick up the phone and call me, and let's have a conversation about whatever is your, either something that we're not doing well or something you'd like to see done better, or just to say, hey, thanks.
So on that point, could you just sort of briefly describe for folks, I know you said that Barron is going to lead the citizens complaint process. Could you just sort of explain to folks how that works? If somebody has a complaint and they file it, what happened? I mean, just as she was saying, so what happens to that? How is that treated?
So there's multiple ways. You can go to our website if you want to fill out a citizen's complaint. Mm-hmm. That gets forwarded directly to me. And then I forward that to the appropriate shift commander. You can come into the station and fill out a written statement, and that will start at the shift commander that individual works for. Will then go to the captain, and then ultimately will make it to me. You can call in anonymously and make a complaint over the phone. There's not a lot to go on, but it still will get investigated. Once all that information is gathered, and then we start doing our investigation. That typically starts with who was the officer, is there body cam video, is there in-car video. We'll start reviewing all those. And then after we have all that documentation, we viewed all that, and then we'll interview the officer. If at that point it's something that could be handled at a shift level, let's say, hey, officer didn't use his turn signal, we'll address it in counseling. If it's something that rises to a serious policy violation, then we'll get it forwarded to Professional Standards Division, and an internal investigation will happen at that point. But no matter where it goes, whoever made the complaint, as long as we have a number and an email, they'll get a phone call, or they'll get a letter is always sent at the completion of any type of citizen's complaint.
Is there an appeal process if a resident doesn't feel that result was satisfactory to
They can
them?
always, I'm the ultimate sayer, so they could call me, write me. If they don't like me, Mr. Mayor, I know you've gotten letters in the past. They're free to write any of the council members or the city manager. I answer directly to the city manager, so feel free to get a hold of Joe. It's not like he's busy.
Gotcha.
Through the chair, if I may. This is terrific. How frequently do you plan on coming back to us with updates? Every 6 months, annually?
Well, we'll be putting these recommendations into Invisio, so there'll be an online portal where you'll be able to kind of check how that progress is looking. I really don't know which one of these will move, of these accreditation tasks will move through quickly, and which ones are going to take a little bit more time. Like I said, some of them are going to be subject to the collective bargaining in the union, so those are going to take a little bit more time. The ones that we can do without the union, then those will move a little bit faster. But we're just dipping our toe in it, so we're really to be determined. I would say it'd be a good thing, not only with the online, but maybe in 6 months, jump back in front of you and say, hey, this is where we're at in our first 6 months of accreditation. I say 18 to 24 months. Some departments have had 3 or 4 people working on it, have done it in 10 months. I think we're pretty good in a lot of areas, but there's a lot of areas that's going to take some work.
And that, I think that's fine. I think 6 months, at least for an update to council and the public, is more than appropriate. And then has there been any discussion at what point should we remeasure? Because we think we're moving the needle. There's a lot of great work being done. But the only way, you know, in process improvement is if you go back out and resurvey again and see how much better we're doing, if we're better. Is that a 2 years out, 3 years out?
I would say part of the accreditation process, once you make all the standards, then the accreditation board comes in and they check everything, and then they start making cold calls to citizens in the community to check that you're actually talking to these people that you've said you've talked to. So there are some checks and balances at the very back end. I would say let us get our feet underneath us, get accreditation, and then see where we go from there as far as.
And I'm not pushing that we do it tomorrow either, but I think it's an important step to, you know, to come up with further initiatives or what's next, right? There's always that next.
Things change a lot in 2 years.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah, but this is terrific. Thank you.
And I guess I'll go last. I appreciate your willingness to do this. I think it's one of the reasons we were comfortable appointing you as chief and making that good decision is. And so I appreciate your willingness to look at your policies and procedures and adjust where necessary, and I think that's really helpful. And when and this is kind of playing off of what Councilman Martin just said, but when I look back and say, okay, if we check all these boxes over the next couple of years and we do all of these things that we say we're going to do, what's going to be different? And I guess in my mind, my hope is maybe 2 things. Internally, morale should improve to some degree as officers believe that the policies are fair and the opportunities for them are fair. I would suspect, and tell me if you disagree with this, so I would suspect there should be some morale improvement internally, and then externally, just not the morale, but maybe I don't know if trust is the right word, but the confidence of the community in the police department that things are transparent, that complaints are handled fairly, and all those things also rises. So I guess to Councilman Martin's point, well, first of all, would you agree that those would be kind of the 2 overarching objectives that we would hope to do from something like this?
Well,
or
first,
am I missing something? Or
when the idea was brought up about accreditation, there's a lot of my contemporaries that said it's a waste of time. I honestly didn't want to be the guy in charge and not know what I didn't know. I didn't want any blind spots in our department. So when we had the opportunity to do this, I welcomed it wholeheartedly, and it has done nothing but good for us so far. I think the morale of our department is at the high that it's been since I've been here. I don't think it's going to go any higher. Some of the policies are
Peak
going.
morale?
It's kind of an ebb and flow.
Yeah.
Some of the policies that we're probably going to put in place, people are going to think that they're being restricted. That's just a mindset until they really wrap their mind about what we're doing. So I think we're good there. And what was the third thing?
well, public confidence.
yeah.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. So I'll be able to stand up here and say, the state of, the Michigan Association of the Chief of Police came up with this accreditation process, which was modeled off a national accreditation process. They go through your police department with a fine-tuned comb. There's nowhere to hide. There's nothing to fake. You have to show the proofs on every single thing you said you have done.
Yeah.
And when you do that, they are saying, they're putting their money, money where their mouth is, and saying, this agency is up to the standard.
Yeah.
The standard that we set forth that is based off the national standard. There's not many police departments. Like I said, there's only 16 in Michigan now that are there, and we're hoping to be one of those top 50 in the next 2 years.
And I love that, and I really do appreciate that you're doing this. I just want you to know, and maybe Joe to know. So I trust like sort of Joe to make sure all the boxes get checked and all the different things happen. But whether it's me sitting here or somebody else, mostly what I'm looking for is, are we helping improve the overall morale and confidence of the community in however we judge that? And I think we need to think about how we're going to measure that and communicate it. Part of the confidence in the community is going to be communicating to them where we're at, how we're trying to move it, and whether we are moving it. So that's a communication issue and a transparency issue. But it will be helpful, I think, for us as leaders to be able to get at that, and in some form or fashion.
Yeah, and I can speak to that a little bit. So the city manager's office and the police chief will work together to kind of align this idea of accreditation with city council's biannual strategic planning process. And of course, our intention is to provide scheduled quarterly biannual updates. And I think there's an opportunity to kind of align that report back out and refresh those metrics, to Councilman Martin's point.
And through the chair, I have one final question. When you became our captain, you proposed doing 21st century community policing and following those pillars. And I was wondering how the accreditation program aligns with that and what's going on. It was an President Obama report about how to address sort of equity and inclusion in police departments. We went down that path, and that's what we were adopting as our police department principles. And I was wondering how the accreditation process aligns with that program, and if it's still in existence, is it still valid? Is it still being used by police departments across the U.S.?
Yeah, 21st century policing is built, woven into accreditation.
Okay.
I mentioned the PERF. That was one of the driving factors behind the 21st century policing and community policing getting back involved with the community. Those are the standards that are adopted in accreditation. Some of the verbiage may be off, but that is what you ultimately want, is a police department that can stand up proud, open its doors to anybody and everybody and say, this is what we do, this is why we're doing it, this is how we're being checked by an outside agency, so that we're doing exactly what we're saying we're doing. And that's why some of these policies are mandated in the process.
Thank you.
All right.
And Chief, I just wanted to know, so with that, I appreciate you working with KRW, but I just want to know, how is you kind of answered this, but, so right now, your staff is kind of on board with the accreditation, they see the value in it, and they're on board to, no?
They'll do what they're told.
Okay.
That's a very short answer.
Yeah.
Spoken like a chief.
Our folks understand what it takes to be a good police department,
Yeah.
right? There's things that we have to do, and this is one of the things that my command staff, who buys into this wholeheartedly, understands. It is our job to sell it to patrol and make them understand why we're doing it. And we have been working on that for a while. So there's no resistance. I think there's a little bit of, man, I don't know, I knew somebody that had an accreditation and it didn't go so well. I haven't received any personal correspondence with any of our officers, and they speak freely to me. But I think they're just kind of waiting. But I don't foresee it being an issue.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Chief. Appreciate the update, and look forward to the progress. Appreciate it. Thanks. All right, our next presentation is the introduction of a new firefighter. And our interim chief is here to make that introduction, right?
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
To my left here, I have firefighter Chad Carr. He joined the department back in October of 2018. We hired him on as a basic EMT, so there's a difference of basic and then paramedic. As you know, paramedic's a very difficult course to pass these days. Before I go on to say that Chad graduated from the Paramedic Academy, I just want to give you a little update and a background about Chad. Chad came on he came on back in October of 2018, and before that he was on the Waterford Fire Department for 1 year. Decided he wanted to be in Ferndale, He's a local resident, lives over in Hazel Park, so I think we got a lifer here, which is a good thing for us. Prior to Waterford, he was enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps for 4 years and did 3 deployments overseas, and then was honorably discharged. He took it upon himself to join firefighter, paramedic, and EMT program at WC3. And I'm proud to say that he successfully completed the paramedic program, and we just want to give him a round of applause.
Absolutely. Chad, congratulations. Thanks for your service, and I look forward to your future in Ferndale.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, next presentation is a sustainability presentation about streetlights.
Thank you. So thank you. Good evening. So we've talked a little bit about this through our budgeting process.
Introduce yourself just
I'm
for
sorry.
the folks at home and so everyone
Yes.
here knows who you are.
My name is Erin Quattel, and I'm the Environmental Sustainability Planner for the city. What I'm going to talk about today is the streetlight proposal and review that Henrik Bader has done for us from EcoWorks. Okay. And he's here to answer any more technical questions as we go through the presentation, if you guys have any. So I'm going to just give an overview of where we are, some of the report findings, the streetlight conversion options that we have briefly discussed in the past, but this is a little bit more fine detail, and then any discussion and questions that you guys may have. So for everybody in the audience, and just as a reminder, we have a couple of different areas throughout our master land use plan as well as our strategic plan that talk about converting our streetlights to LEDs. And converting our streetlights to LEDs is what a lot of communities have been doing, and it's just one step, and a pretty easy step to take in making our community more sustainable. So through that, we had a process with EcoWorks, like I mentioned, to evaluate our streetlight program, see the ownership, see what condition they were, and then provide recommendations for how we can update to LEDs. So these next two are just an overview map of all of the streetlights that we have in Ferndale. And on this particular one, it's a little bit hard to see, so I apologize for that. But basically what it shows is energy only, which is essentially what the city owns or what they pay for energy, and then they have the DTE owned. So largely our streetlights are owned by DTE Energy, which is not surprising. That's very common in communities around this area. And this one just shows, again, I apologize because you can't really see it very well, but there are several different dots on there that is the same image that you saw previously, but it shows you what type of fixture it is. So for example, it'll show how many LEDs versus the conventional streetlights that we have in our community. And so what Henrik was able to do with his team is really evaluate exactly what that is and kind of cross-check that with some of the information that we obtained from DTE as well. And what we found is that 72% is mercury vapor, high-pressure sodium is at 26%, and we only have about 2% of LEDs. And basically what that means is the mercury vapor is a very outdated fixture type, similar to the high-pressure sodium, which is a very outdated fixture type, and those are no longer being used in communities and as they upgrade to LED. And so there was a total of like 1,800, a little bit more than that, of streetlights in our community. So 36 out of those, 1,800 or so are actually owned by the city. Some of them are located in our downtown, and they're the decorative streetlights that we see in our downtown area, as well as some of them at a yard. And what we really kind of got into is what they're being rated at, which affects how much we spend on our street lighting, both in energy and other environmental factors. And what Henrik did as well is looked at if we're being fairly charged for our street lights, which we are. So this image shows you what our streetlights are consuming. So we have over 1 million kilowatt hours of, almost 2 million kilowatt hours per year of energy that we're consuming. It costs us like about $500,000 to pay for that energy that we're using in the fixtures. It equates to 2.5 million pounds of carbon dioxide that is being emitted, which is then, contributes to the amount of coal, and that's also like a metric to show you about how many passenger cars that would be in our community. So by upgrading to LEDs, we can have significant environmental and financial impacts. So the next couple things are just 3 different options that were outlined in the report to talk about how we can go about updating to LEDs. So this would be like the top, converting everything from all of our non-LED DTE-owned fixtures, and this is, as you can see on the screen, it is a variance between about 665,000 to 720,000. And the reason that there's a range is because as rates change and fixtures update and everything, it's just kind of what the standard is for that. So with this option, you have a monthly reduction of $12,800, and that's about a 4.3 to 4.7 payback return on investment for an upfront investment of that amount. And then once that payback is achieved, we would save on annual savings of $153,000 and change. So pretty significant.
Through the chair, would you prefer questions as you go or at the end?
Whatever you like. I'm comfortable with either.
So for the $665,000 to $720,000, since 98% are owned by DTE, we bear the full brunt of the cost for the exchange?
That is a very interesting thing about how our DTE works in LA.
A contract? Yeah.
Yeah, so essentially, yes, and Henrik can definitely speak more to this because he's experienced this with other communities. But essentially, DTE will not openly replace LEDs. It would be on the cost of the community.
I don't understand.
And on the annual savings, is that calculated? I mean, is that standardized, so any rate increases and such, like how do you get to $153,600? Because you've got rate increases
Yeah.
every year, there's a lot of multiple factors.
Right.
There's reasons that costs go up and down.
Absolutely, and that's recognized in the formal report, some more details. Henrik, I don't know if you have a better explanation than that, but that was all factored into these recommendations.
Okay. And I guess just a general question, do we have a contract with DTE that outlines what their responsibility is versus ours?
In
So
short,
if one
yes.
falls over, do we do it, or do they?
Yeah, so basically the policy is that we're not permitted to do any work on DTE-owned fixtures. And so this would have to be something contracted with DTE specifically.
And if I may, Aaron, isn't a member of EcoWorks here tonight to kind of,
Sure.
that might be able to help some of this? It might be worth just introducing Henrik.
Sure. Henrik, you can come on up. Man of the hour.
So DTE owns the light, we have a contract with them, and we pay them to fix it?
Yes.
Can you help me through that, please?
Short answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hello, I'm Henrik. I wrote this report. I'm with EcoWorks. Yeah,
you.
so you're entirely correct. That's why increasingly municipalities have been looking at how they can take ownership over the streetlights. And, that's a viable option. I think, there's certainly cost involved with that, but, I'm happy to have that discussion offline and kind of talk you through that option as well.
I think it would bear further investigation, just at least to look into it, because that's just insanity to me. So,
Yeah, and I
okay.
think, especially when you start looking at paybacks and things, I mean, when you're thinking this, you're looking essentially at about, 4 or 5 year payback, but this can be significantly reduced if you actually own your infrastructure. So, happy to continue that discussion.
Thank you.
And then to your point about calculations on the rates, so this was based on the most recent rates available, which was in August of 2018. There was so certainly there's variability in that. I will say that the variability generally trends upwards, so I think it's a fairly conservative estimate.
You have a sense of what the variability is, plus or minus 5%, 10%?
So rates generally tend to increase, when you're looking at rates, you can factor in probably a 4% increase year over year. And that's kind of across the board, that's buildings and streetlights.
Sure.
Streetlights can go up much faster.
Thank you.
Sure.
Don't go far.
Yeah, don't go far.
He'll be right here if you need him.
My question was, there was significant funding for cities to convert their LED or their streetlights about 4 or 5 years ago through energy efficiency community development block grants. I was wondering, is there any funding like that existing now to help cities convert? Because that was a push. So is there anything like that to help make this transition?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything recently. I don't know, there hasn't really been anything. But I mean, it's certainly something that I'm continuously monitoring.
The president doesn't think there's an issue.
The former president gave out energy efficiency block grants to help cities convert.
Windmills also cause cancer, so I can't.
Well, there's that. All right, so Aaron, before we go down a
So,
pad path.
this image conversely shows all of the things we would be saving if we, when we decide to convert all of our streetlights to LEDs. You can see all the metrics on the screen. I don't need to read them off to you, but again, a very significant financial and environmental impact. This second option, if you will, is very similar to that first. It basically just stretches the conversion over a 5-year period. So instead of doing the upfront, LED conversion up all at once, it just stretches it over a longer period of time, which can be a little bit easier to budget for, can be a little bit more strategic in the upgrades, and was one of the options in that report. And then finally, the third option is a little bit confusing, but if you bear with me, I'll kind of walk through it. So 1,082 streetlights are mercury vapor, which they're the most outdated and the most energy inefficient fixtures. And so this third option would focus and target those particular fixtures and replace them, and you get the greatest amount of energy conservation and environmental benefits. So based on some of the information that we have from other mercury vapor fixtures that have been updated, this would cost around $68,000, and with a pretty immediate payback with a little less than a year. And then the subsequent LED conversion would come at varying costs depending on the type of fixture that was being updated. So that's why it's a little bit more vague and a little bit more confusing. But this would definitely give us the most bang for your buck, if you will, for LED conversion, both fiscally and environmentally.
Are you, of the three options, are you looking for a decision tonight?
I'm not looking for a decision tonight. I know that we've talked about this kind of in passing. I wanted to give you guys the raw data from the report, and so we can have a further discussion.
Because it strikes me that the options are basically financial, right? And so
Very
that's
much
going to
so.
be a conversation that we'll need to have through the budget process.
Absolutely.
What can we afford? What pots of money do we have to pay for what? And so.
Right.
That's correct, Council. And we also have a capital improvement plan that'll open up in June, and any of these options actually is eligible for a capital improvement plan project. So kind of understanding the options in front of us is worthy of entering into that with full education.
Okay.
So could we, through the chair, set a deadline of when we want this to come back by and make a decision so it doesn't lag
Yeah, absolutely.
without killing the horses?
I think it'd be reasonable to bring back a report on recommendation before the fiscal year.
Okay, that'd be great.
Any other questions?
No, this is great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yep, it's very clear. Thank you, Aaron. Excellent. And our final presentation is going to be on a Baker College update. Jordan, you're going to do that? Yeah. All right.
Good evening, Council. Thank you, Mayor. Like you said, I'm going to give just a quick update, just like the last council meeting, on where we stand with the Baker Ferndale NRA as it approaches its expiration at the end of the month. So I'm going to run through. Please feel free to stop me with questions. I can also take them at the end. It's a pretty short presentation, but without further ado, maybe this works, maybe it doesn't. We'll find out. Okay, great. Perfect. It worked. So the last major milestone that happened since the last update was the April 3rd Planning Commission discussion, which, and I printed these out, so these are online. This is on the project webpage. It should be, anyway, looking at Kara, the Communications Director. But yes, so if you go to the Baker Projects page, you'll see this up there. So it's kind of written so that folks following along at home, or if you're not here at the meeting, or if I'm going too fast, or you just want some time to digest it, all the information's on the slide. But that discussion meeting, which was held on April 3rd, followed the traditional Planning Commission discussion process. So non-voting discussion session on the project concept. So just the high level, what that forum took was there was a presentation by city staff on the project and NRA process. There was a presentation by Baker representatives on updates to the design since the last time they were at Planning Commission, and also subsequent feedback they received in different forums. Then public comment and questions and discussion from the planning commissioners. So the public was invited to give comments, and then the commissioners have sort of a back and forth with the applicant from a technical nature, and they focus on things like design, form-based code ordinance, et cetera. The primary takeaways from that meeting, I can certainly take questions if people have more than that, more than just these two bullets here, but essentially Baker was unable to present a rendering or update on the mixed-use parking deck because they're still evaluating options in response to feedback on how that deck could be configured, where it could go on the different NRA properties. I'll talk about that a little more in a moment. But also a general takeaway was the commission was pretty adamant, at least the way I read it, was that they would not be able to make a decision or fully consider the project without several items being completed. So a full site plan, information on community benefits, and other elements such as traffic studies. So, and on that note, that is something that I wanted to highlight in today's update. With the NRA drawing to a close, several of those deliverables that Planning Commission honed in on are actually called for in the NRA. So that's another document that is online, and that NRA was broken into these 30-day milestones that essentially took all the specific deliverables that we wanted, things like traffic studies, parking plans, development agreements, community benefits agreements, and the way the NRA was structured, every 30 days, a general concept was morphing into a final form document for consideration. Well, the city of Ferndale and Baker College, hearing all the feedback that had been given since the NRA signing, there was an intentional slowdown of that process to allow for more engagement. So essentially those milestones were sort of blown apart, and in good faith trying to navigate the NRA process and collect the input and provide more opportunities for engagement. Essentially what you're seeing is most of these items are delayed, so they're behind schedule. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is a little bit about where they are at and what that means sort of as the NRA winds to a close. So again, the Planning Commission honed on several of those. Again, they were meant at this phase in the process, for those that remember way back in January when we presented that tentative timeline, at this point, those would be sort of near final form, so you could start seeing what those agreements would look like, the tangible specifics. We're not in a position to have those because of the delay and because of providing for that input and those additional meetings. So that delay shaped the completion timeline and the nature of each of those items. I'm going to talk about that in a second. So again, that slowdown occurred in response to the community's concern over the project pace and desire for more engagement and input into the project. So we created that space for that conversation. Many of these items, however, if not complete, have been discussed conceptually with information that's available in city FAQ sheets online and at community meetings. In fact, I noticed by the agenda there's some printout leftovers from the 21st debrief. So when we weren't able to give specifics, we're giving the high-level themes, sort of where things are at, what's being discussed, and how it's coming together to the best of our ability. And so those, again, are online, and some of those are in print in the back there. So just to the status, there's 4 major items, and wow, that is a bright spreadsheet, so I apologize for that. But essentially what you're looking at are 4 items. The first of which is a complete site plan. So the original goal there was to have the site plan with all the related studies, the traffic study, and that's the second item, so spoiler alert, but to have all that stuff presented to Planning Commission in April. So if you kind of looked back at the NRA milestones, again, taking general idea, moving it to sort of near final form document that could be considered as part of our formal processes. So the current status, the exact location of the parking deck is really kind of what's hanging that element up. So the Baker, this slowdown really kind of came into full force when, you know, the big amount of feedback that was received, especially as it relates to the displacement of parking during construction. So as that sort of, you know, there were a lot of concepts talked early on about, you know, providing alternative parking solutions, valet, Lyft, et cetera. The business community spoke up pretty forcefully in terms of looking at, well, those options are great, but they're not as good as having this parking right here, right now, while the dot is under construction. So that is something that Baker has kind of gone back and retooled and looked at the other options in the NRA, because for those that may recall, the NRA talked about 1 location for the campus, but up to 3 locations for the deck. So they're looking at that and they're determining feasibility. And a common theme is that sort of slowdown and reconsideration of the design footprint has sort of put everything else like a domino effect on hold, because kind of the tip of the spear, the community benefits agreements, the development performance, the phasing are all sort of hinged on the final proposed development concept. So just a quick note on the complete site plan. The project has been discussed at Planning Commission twice, February 20th and April 3rd. The site plan, we're not expecting to see one in April 2019. So that's a piece of information that's critical to move forward on, but we are not expecting that it will be ready before the end of the NRA. So related plans and studies, again, related to the site plan. So all the things that go along with having a complete site plan in the city of Ferndale, traffic studies, photometric plans, landscaping, drainage, design, all those sort of elements all go along with that. We can't consider a site plan, and we won't consider a site plan without those things. So that, ergo, is sort of why we're seeing we're not expecting to have that come to us in April, because that is a heavy lift. In fact, they've already sort of missed the submission deadline for the April meeting. So we require, to allow a healthy back and forth, we require a 3-week review window. So if you want to be on a planning commission agenda, you got to get us all your stuff, all your ducks in a row. And that's also online, the requirements for a site plan. All that has to be in 3 weeks ahead of time. So we don't even let the ship leave the harbor until all the ingredients are on it. So that's those two items. Final two are sort of related to finalized agreements, and these two kind of sound a little bit repetitive, because the first one is the contents and the second one's the actual agreement. So land and parking details on things like ownership and management of the deck, parking share, how that's all going to work out, how the public parking is going to work, and how the land transfer would work. So we've talked about high-level concepts. The original goal, again, would have all these sort of near final form draft agreements ready for viewing and consideration. But again, because of the slowdown, we're at conceptual theme mode. I mean, the general theme of this update here is that all of these sort of things that are predicated on that final footprint and the final scope of the proposed development, which is in flux in response to the feedback, all of those items hinge on what that final footprint is, what their final construction cost is, what their timing is, what they're realistically able to deliver. So all that all is just a domino effect. When you slow down that design, which we did for good reason, puts all these other things behind. So again, what I'll say on both of these, conceptual themes have been shared in city FAQ sheets that are posted on the project website. So you can see themes like, for example, for community benefits, we've talked about tax equivalence. We know it's a nonprofit. We know they don't typically pay taxes. We've talked about making up for that and looking at different ways that can be done. So all that stuff, again, is on hold, and all of it is sort of, again, subject to what that final proposed footprint is. So those 4 items being incomplete at this stage, what does that mean for the NRA next steps? Well, first off, both the city of Ferndale and Baker College agree that a significant amount of information remains to be completed before NRA expiration on April 24th, 2019. We both also agree that no further action should be taken unless this information is provided in its entirety. Further, the remaining time, so a little over 2 weeks, will be used to complete whatever can be feasibly completed. So done 100%, done well. The city of Ferndale, again, and finally, and most important, the city of Ferndale will not consider, and Baker College will not request, any formal approval for the project unless all NRA deliverables can be completed in a time and manner that allows sufficient review and approval through the required public processes, including the Planning Commission, City Council, and the Project Study Committee. So essentially where we're at is Baker has just been through the Planning Commission on April 3rd. They owe us some follow-up from that meeting and a report out to us of how they're responding to all that feedback received and where they'll be. And essentially what we're looking at is those items aren't complete. We don't expect all of them to be done before the NRA, but having sort of a frank conversation with the applicant about where they're going to be and what that looks like as the NRA expires.
Through the chair, to clarify, not just with because I was at the Planning Commission, but not just with the Planning Commission went back and requested, but all the things encompassed in the NRA you listed there. We're not going to consider any of that until we've got something to consider.
That's 100% accurate, yes.
I want to clarify, because even if it didn't come up at Planning Commission, there's some of those things that Chair Baker you wouldn't directly address because it's not the purview of the Planning Commission.
Right.
So it's a little broader than just planning.
Right, absolutely. That's absolutely fair. Certainly, Planning Commission honed on the ones that were sort of in their lane of consideration. But that general rule of thumb, that this slide here, that conclusion is, if we don't have all the information we need to make a decision, we're not going to force ourselves to make a decision on abstract ideas.
But you're talking about an approval. If the decision was not to move forward, we can make that decision.
Correct.
There's nothing in, so when I'm reading that, it said the the city won't consider any formal approval for the project unless we have all these deliverables. And if I'm hearing you correctly, we're not going to have the deliverables, right? So essentially what you're saying is council can't make an approval if they wanted to at the next meeting, right?
Right.
But we can,
We said, to clarify, we said we won't.
we won't.
We won't.
Right, in fairness, oh, sorry, sir, please finish.
No,
Sorry.
so
I thought we had another option.
Through the
too.
chair,
yeah.
Extension.
it would be up to council whether there should be any extension in the NRA. The NRA doesn't require those documents to be submitted, but it provides that window for the applicant to provide that detail and those required components in order for the council to decide whether or not to proceed. So it will end of its own accord on the expiration of the NRA date.
Yeah. And don't misunderstand me, I'm not advocating for an extension or
Right.
an approval, I'm just saying, I didn't know where that came from, and, I mean, the council has the ability to approve regardless, I mean,
That's why I said, well, we can do
We can.
legally anything we want. We said we won't.
Right.
okay. All right, I just want to be clear about that.
Through the chair, can I follow up on that? Then, if they haven't submitted a site plan and April 24th is upon us, and you said that, I mean, my question is, when do we expect a site plan? Is there a new target date that the applicant has pitched as a potential that they'll be ready? I'm just wondering.
Sure, that's a good question, Councilwoman. Essentially, the planning commission being just last Wednesday, and the Baker executive team was off-site for a training, so they haven't had a chance to react fully to the feedback that was collected. Essentially, just in all frankness, we expect a report out from them either this week or next in terms of what they realistically expect to complete, and that'll inform staff as we look at what recommendation we're going to put together. What I would guess, just my professional opinion, I don't see. Now, granted, their architect has been incredibly responsive and incredibly efficient. I don't typically see a site plan turn around that fast. That being said, they have looked extensively at the project. They have worked with their architects. So that's generally where things are at. But, just in terms of navigating a good faith NRA, giving, there's the 100 days, giving them the opportunity to complete the items. The NRA really, again, the goal was to lay out our expectations as a city in terms of if you want to go through our processes, these are the bare bones items we need to see. So they, from a technical perspective, have until the expiration of the NRA to put those things together. But as Dan had mentioned so eloquently, Attorney Dan, not Councilman Dan,
Although you're pretty elegant.
I was going to say, I was getting to that, I was getting to the good save. You both say time, but in this case, the eloquent thing that the city attorney had mentioned is, unless there is an act to extend, which could only come from council,
Yeah.
the NRA would expire of its own accord. It's got a 100-day shelf life.
Jordan, why does more detail around the community benefits depend on the site plan?
Because essentially what that does, and just as part of the negotiations that have been ongoing, a lot of what will, the ideas and the concepts don't necessarily change, but the scope of what is possible and from a financial standpoint depends on their financial wherewithal and how far they're willing to let us push the envelope. That's just, the negotiation is a two-way street. So if, for example, let's say, one of the options of the NRA is they could put the deck on private property. If they did that and took a city-owned property off the table, because right now they're talking about using two, in theory, they come up with a plan that's using one, that's sort of less city asset on the table, so.
That's community benefit. I mean,
Not necessarily
not to be crass,
guaranteed, but that's
yeah.
sometimes how negotiations go. It's what do you bring to the table? How is that measured? How is that quantified? As part of the negotiations, we've had to tabulate, things like the tax equivalents, the value of the land, and all those sorts of elements that go into negotiation. And so, when you're going to ask for something, you have to substantiate it. Obviously, the city team is fighting as hard as possible for everything that we can get. But again, you can't really have a hard sort of commitment until the other party knows exactly what they're going to be doing.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Other questions? Is that the end of?
That's it, yeah,
presentation?
sorry,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. All right, thank you, Jordan.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Yeah. All right, that concludes our presentations. Next item of business is call to audience. This is your opportunity to address council on anything that you like that's, I was going to say not on the agenda, but if it was a presentation item, you could certainly speak to that. So come on up to the mic, give us your name and address, no, to the microphone over here at the podium, sir. Yep. Give us your name, and 3 minutes is yours to speak on any issue that you'd like.
It says 30, now you're telling me 3?
Yeah,
I'm a taxpayer, I'll have my 30 minutes.
No, 3 minutes, sir. 3 minutes. 30 minutes total for all speakers, and I'm very loose about that.
We're more than 30 minutes on each of them, the officer.
Sir, you get 3 minutes.
Anyway, real quick, 3 things. First, as the officer said, they're
what
not
is your
that
name, sir, by the way?
busy. So my question to the mayor and that guy drawing on his piece of paper, is there a way we can save the taxpayer some money and law enforcement and put it into a community center or businesses? Also, my issue, as I said to this guy in the gray, the mayor, who told me to talk to this guy, for the last 12 years, not just myself, but the people on bikes and everything, you got these businesses that set their stuff right in the middle of the sidewalk. Then you got the light right here. Here's your walkers. Here's the smaller area for bikes, because you got the business owners that decide to put a patio in the middle of the sidewalk. Couple summers ago, I almost dislocated my shoulder hitting it on that light post just 3 inches from Dino's. Also, why is parking so expensive here in Ferndale? I don't get it. That's it.
Okay.
I mean, eventually someone's gonna get hurt and a lot can happen. The city can get sued, the business can get sued. The lady that handles the light, I mean, I don't know what everybody altogether pays in taxes every year, but I'm sure it's enough to get that light moved to the right 3 inches, because that'll give more room for the patio set, people walking, and the bikes.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
And it does make sense. I mean, the
Thank you,
officer
sir. Thank you,
said
sir. You're at your 3 minutes, okay?
Thank
you.
Aren't busy, so save the taxpayers some money in law enforcement.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hello, thanks for your time. Dan Moyer, Central Street. Jordan, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Thanks. Looking at the ENRA, it says that the developer shall deliver to city a conceptual plan for the commercial academic development and shall identify and deliver a conceptual plan for its proposed parking structure, which you've addressed. It also says, including the location, details regarding proposed ownership, control, and management for the parking structure. So my question is, what sort of conversations have you had in terms of proposed ownership and control of that structure? Because at the original Planning Commission meeting, Baker did have a parking structure on the table. So I was curious as to what sort of discussions or conversations you had in terms of proposed ownership, control, and management.
Yeah, but answer it up there, just because if there's folks at home, they have to hear you in the microphone to hear you. Thank you.
Thanks. It's a good question. So as I mentioned in the presentation tonight, we have discussed and shared publicly several high-level themes on those conversations. So yes, at the Planning Commission, a parking structure was on the table as an idea. It's a requirement of the project for them to meet their own parking. But as I mentioned in the presentation, they don't know exactly which location within the NRA they want to pick. So that's why there was not a rendering of the parking structure. They have, and this is all on the fact sheets that we have prepared, but there were initial concepts of the massing, the size, the number of spaces, and the preferred alternative that they started with, that they came up to us with, was to put the deck on the City Hall lot. So that's where a lot of those conceptual numbers originated. So the internal conversations that we've had and the information, which based on those conversations, the information that we put out into the public for kind of consideration of this project as a community, basically we're focused on, okay, this is the concept they brought to us. So things like our strong preference for ownership of the deck, public ownership of the deck, public management of the deck, public ownership of the land underneath. All those things are on the fact sheets that have been out there since at least the March 21st community meeting. So that's sort of some of the themes that we talked about, and similarly community benefits are, those high-level activities are in those fact sheets. I'm happy to, what I would say is, out of respect, certainly take any questions on this that are here. I'm willing to hang out outside to have offline conversations if people have detailed conversations and questions. I do know that there's other business on the agenda and there's other folks that want to speak. That being said, totally happy to have those conversations offline and hear the questions here too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
I asked that question just because if details were not given regarding proposed ownership, control, and management at that time, right, Baker would have then been in violation of the NRA at that 30-day mark.
So I'll speak to that too, please. Sure. So again, as I mentioned in the presentation tonight, those milestones were guides within the NRA. So the NRA is also governed by a thing called good faith. So that's two parties working together, being honest and laying their cards on the table. And so as part of that good faith, as I mentioned in this presentation that was, and I apologize if you weren't here for that, I didn't sort of look back, but essentially what we did is we laid out and we said, all right, there was an intentional slowdown of that process that delayed the delivery of all those items. So we knew that a lot of those milestones were not going to be met, but we also know that regardless of that, the NRA still expires on April 24th. So the slowdown was created to provide for additional engagement and input. So it wouldn't have technically, now if they decided to start acting in bad faith and considering alternative properties and changing the game on us and sort of breaching that agreement, yeah, sure, that would have been a violation. But I think we both, as both parties, went in knowing to create that slowdown, it was going to affect those milestones. So in good faith, that would not be considered. And I would certainly defer to the city attorney. I'm certainly willing to be
That's
on that.
That's fine, because this isn't
Yeah.
we could have this kind of a debate, or not a debate, but a discussion all night, but I appreciate your willingness to meet offline, because this really is the public's opportunity.
Sure, thank you,
I
sir.
appreciate you answering the specific questions, but we're going to give the public an opportunity.
Great, and I'll actually stick to my 3 minutes this time. I appreciate your leniency in the past. I also appreciate the service that you all intake, regardless of difference of opinions or agreement. I respect the service and commitment that you all have to Ferndale. I hope we're in agreement about this Baker project, and we'll, I guess, eventually find out. I did want to talk about the conjecture regarding Baker finding private land. It was mentioned briefly at the last meeting, and it's been brought up a couple of times. First, my understanding is Baker would still be responsible for providing parking for students and staff, and I just question how realistic it is that they would be able to make the deals and find the space and everything else. Second, if they did this, they would not take away from downtown parking facilities during construction, which I think is a benefit. And I don't believe we've really seen any community benefits to this project at all. Maybe we have a disagreement there. So regarding that argument, I think that the sort of threat of Baker finding private land, that's not a concern of mine. And at least our elected officials don't become complicit in bringing an institution like Baker here. I am, as you know, disappointed in the way that this has been handled, and my disappointment stems from the NRA itself. From my viewpoint, the NRA seems to circumvent the democratic process. I think it would have been far more beneficial for you to have solicited community feedback prior to entering the NRA. What would that have done? That would have allowed us to actually discuss and converse and have a dialogue about this project. You could respond to Baker charging $400 for tuition, or you could respond to an abysmal graduation rate of 8 to 20%, depending on which campus we're talking about, right? You could provide your thoughts on the institution, that exploits the system in their use of Pell Grants and thus exploits students who are most in need. At the Planning Commission, a member came up here and it said he wanted Ferndale to be welcoming. He welcomed the diversity that Baker might bring, and I would certainly welcome that too. But my point would be that Baker exploits oftentimes students who are who tend to come from a socioeconomic disadvantaged background. So what has the NRA done instead? It has pretty much made you willingly silent on one of the largest issues our city has discussed in at least my 10 years as a resident here. So all the while you've been...
And you are at your time, if you want to just kind
of... No, that's good, that's good.
Okay.
I appreciate your time.
Finish up your comments.
No, it's all right. I appreciate your time, and I'm at least encouraged by some of the slides that I've seen recently. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, Eric Klein, 300 East Lewiston. I've been up here a number of times to voice my concern about the Baker project, and I think today all I want to say is that there's a lot of people in the room here who have been following this process for 6 or 7 weeks, and what I got from the presentation we just saw is that Baker has slowed down the process in order, I think, to look at the parking quagmire. But we also have this deadline of April 24th when the NRA ends, but it's unclear what's going to happen at that point. I know I'm not supposed to ask questions, but I think it would be, I'm going to phrase this not as a question. It would be helpful if the people in the room could know what the possible options are come April 24th.
That's a fair question, and I would defer to our attorney, because I want to be precise about what our options are next week. Or next meeting.
If I could, through the chair, it appears that there would be two options. One would be to provide notice to Baker that the time periods underneath the NRA have not been satisfied and terminate the NRA. And there is also a section 1.3 that would provide for consideration of an extension, obviously at the discretion of this body.
Right.
Okay, and if the NRA is terminated, does that mean that the project is dead, or could you continue to negotiate, but it's not exclusive?
That's a great question. It's a good question.
It would mean that there would be no exclusivity, and the city could consider anything with respect to its property.
Okay, and the last thing is that the extension, it says that there's a limit of 30 days. It says that in the NRA. Is that a hard number, or is that a number that you could extend?
It says that in the NRA, it's subject to agreement by the mutual agreement of both parties to the document.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Timothy Risk, 541 West Hazelhurst Street. It looks like we're talking about NRAs tonight.
I understand.
Yeah, so I'll try to make this quick. I wanted to learn a little bit more about NRAs in the city of Ferndale. I'm really not trying to be critical when I come up here. This has been a learning opportunity for me, watching this process, and I appreciate the time to speak up here and ask questions. So I looked at Ferndale's history online. I saw 3 NRAs. I saw one in March of 2014 for the 360 project. There was a proposal to and then there was a proposal to extend that after it expired 1 year after it started in March of 2015. And then last year, September 10th, 2019, the council voted for a 150-day NRA with Versa Wanda LLC with the intent to secure private developers for 20,000 square feet of office space, 20,000 square feet of residential space, and 15,000 square feet of street level space for the DOT project. That was a 150-day NRA, so from what I understand, that NRA expired sometime this year, early to mid-February. Other than those two, the only one that I can find is this Baker NRA. So, first of all, I'd like to know what happened with the NRA with Versa Wanda when that expired. Is there any more negotiation with them for this space on the DOT project?
Joe, do you want to?
Sure, I can speak to that. Yeah, we're still in active negotiation with Versa Wanda on developing the would-be office, and the NRA in this instance was proposed in response to a public request for qualifications to develop the private components of the DOT, and Versa won a competitive bid throughout that process. So the NRA is a tool to allow them to consider the time and investment devices it would take to develop that office, including they have to do some speculation on architectural and design fees, engineering fees. So in exchange for their investment, they would like a period of exclusivity to kind of work through that and decide, is it worth their time and effort and energy? So right now, we're still in productive good faith negotiations, and we're working through that process.
Okay, but not through an NRA anymore. That NRA is over.
Pardon?
That NRA is over, it expired, correct? You're still negotiating, but not within the NRA.
I don't have the document in front of me, but I'd be happy to
Okay,
have a
that's okay.
offline conversation with you.
Okay, so, I tried to do a little
We
bit
are
of
kind
research.
of, we are over your time. but
I'm
if you
over
would-
my time?
Yeah, I know 3 minutes seems to be
All right.
fast, but,
That's okay, that other guy was up there 3
So-
times, and he'll cut me off, so let him go.
All right, it's not that important. I just have some questions about NRAs. It appears to me that,
and I'd be happy to have you either submit them to
Okay.
Jordan, and we'll respond to them.
All right.
In writing or verbally.
I don't think they're working for Ferndale. I'd just like to consider some alternatives in the future.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Happy springtime, everyone. Evelyn Elster, West Drayton. At the last council meeting, Mayor Coulter explained regarding the call to audience that if it seems like you're silent, it's because you were giving us our time, not going to argue or debate with us, and that council would weigh in and would give us your perspective shortly, citing other business needs that you needed to get through. You rarely respond or consider public concerns at all, seems. There was no NRA preventing you from responding to our concerns regarding the 29 trees to be cut down at Geary Park, and yet you chose not to acknowledge those concerns or respond. You did, however, choose to concentrate on the grant funds acquired by Parks and Rec as if that's all that matters. It is not. Mayor and council may think that in comparison to the developers currently wooing you, the citizen, homeowner, taxpayers are small potatoes, but we are a multitude of small potatoes and we vote. We've noticed the term limits of city officials have been removed from the city website also. More recent homebuyers in Ferndale are a surprisingly perceptive and intelligent group, not as gullible or passive as you might prefer them to be. Rest assured, voters are paying attention in Ferndale and surrounding cities also. Councilwoman Piana mentioned civility at the last meeting. The fact that I am standing here not spewing expletives under the circumstances is a personal triumph.
And
I
vice
don't think-
versa.
Pardon?
And vice versa.
I don't think it's so much civility you desired as collective pats on the back and told how wonderful you are. You do a fine job of that amongst yourselves, and you have a few minions, groupies for that. I'm a firm believer in encouragement and edification, but not inclined to accommodate you at this time. I do, however, believe that just like the ivy in our yard, council needs to be kept in check. If I didn't prune back the ivy and keep it in check, it would soon take over and I'd find myself subject to a fascist garden. I hope you follow me.
Sure do. I agree with you.
Fascist.
Good evening.
Good evening. It's good to see everyone again. Karen Morajan. I'm a former Ferndale resident and, kind of in the back of my mind considering coming back. That said, I need to read this extremely fast to stay within
3 minutes.
time frame. Okay, so with Easter fast approaching, please do not buy bunnies, chicks, or ducks. You either take them for life, don't make any excuses, or don't take them at all, because the commercial breeders and the backyard breeders do not care at all. It's all about money, and they profit off of them. It's exploitation, and we cannot do that to the animals. Again, they're a lifetime commitment, and rabbits can live anywhere between 10 to 14 years if they're properly taken care of. They reach sexual maturity at the age of 6 months, and the failure to spay and neuter these rabbits not only produces more bunnies, but the cancer rate increases with each passing year. Rabbits don't like to be held, and they do bite, and bite hard when they're frightened and stressed. They can also die within 24 hours if you ignore the signs of them not eating, drinking, peeing, and pooping. They don't vomit. They groom themselves excessively, so you have to constantly comb them. Otherwise, they wind up with hairballs, and that blocks their intestinal tract. It creates GI stasis, and the worst of all is bloat, and more often than not, that's often deadly. Rabbits are not meant to be confined to wire cages. They're very curious and they're very sociable, and they never, ever, ever should be included in petting zoos because it's far too noisy and stressful of an environment with all the loud music, the carnival rides, unsupervised children, along with adults who poke their fingers in the cages into their faces, their sides, and their butts. There's no protection from the sweltering sun, the heat, the humidity. There's no means for these animals to escape from the public, which more often than not is feeding them the wrong food sold at the petting zoos. A rabbit's diet is 75% Timothy hay and an eighth to a quarter cup of Timothy pellets. Alfalfa is only for those under a year or if mama's nursing. The greens are very specific, and you cannot give them kale, nor iceberg, nor corn. I would respectfully request and strongly encourage you to contact Barn Sanctuary and Sasha Farm, who will gladly share with you how much care is required for all the farm animals and why they should not be allowed in petting zoos. Because when those animals are no longer babies and they become adults, they're sent to slaughterhouses. And there's also the overbreeding problem. There's just breeders that don't care, and these poor animals wind up with very horrific diseases and die painful deaths. The shelters are overwhelmed. I'm sorry?
You are at 3 minutes, if you could come to your
Oh,
conclusion.
sure. And so with all this going on...
Sir, would you be quiet, please? It's her turn to talk, okay?
I am trying to wrap up. And with all this going on, the shelters do wind up being completely overwhelmed because of the Easter bunny dumps. People are dumping them all over. And we did get Fern and her babies at our shelter. They came from Ferndale. She was dumped, and she wound up at our shelter. And within hours, she gave birth to her babies. So, please, I ask that everyone just do not buy chicks, bunnies, and ducks. And thank you for your time. I do apologize. I need to go. I need to eat or I'm going to fall on my face. I will return in 2 weeks with more ways to protect the animals. And thank you so much for your time.
All right, thank you. We'll be here.
Hi, I'm Sharon Chess. You already know my feelings on Baker, so I won't go into that any further. It's been covered quite a bit. I'm here representing the Ferndale Community Concert Band. Yesterday, we did our spring performance, and we were met with a standing ovation. It was a very, very moving performance. People were moved to tears. I was getting hugged by strangers, but I'm not bringing anybody up on charges. I felt, so it was a welcome kind of, gratitude. What came from our performance yesterday, and I'm so proud to tell the community about this, we have been invited to play for the NAACP convention at Cobo Hall for May 5th. And our audience will be 6,000 to 7,000 people from all over the country. So we're very excited about this. And then just for your FYI, I take names and numbers of those in attendance of our performances and, of course, the band members. We reach 21 different cities from Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, and Washtenaw. So we are far-reaching. And I'm hoping in the future, from our proven performance and investment and commitment to the community, that one day the city will truly buy into having a band of our caliber in the community, because we are an asset to all of you and to our students. And we love playing here. We love what we do. We're committed to stay here for a long time, but we need community buy-in and city buy-in and support. Come to our concerts. They are free. And our next concert is on Father's Day at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the Ferndale High School auditorium. So we look forward to seeing you there. We'll have a free ice cream social for everybody in attendance, saying thank you for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Good evening.
Good evening, Council. Ben Buttolph, Highland Street. I wanted to open with a question first, just regarding the NWID process. Who sets the timeline for that, the number of days? Because as I just heard, there was a 150-day, like 6-month one, and Baker had a 3-month or so one. So who sets the amount of time for those?
Go ahead.
It's negotiated. Yeah, it's negotiated. And I think it's really project specific and party specific. In the case of the DOT, they knew that the city was going to build the public parking infrastructure first. And so the timeline was kind of thinking around that.
Okay, so it's negotiated, but the person seeking it would approve that, obviously.
Yeah.
So Baker approved a 3-month timeline and failed to
Not
meet.
3 months, is it? How many days?
3 months or so.
100 days.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Rounding
Oh,
up.
yeah, I'm close enough. Yeah, 100. Yeah.
So they approved this timeline, and they failed to meet any of their deadlines, essentially. They're just not prepared. They bit off more than they could chew. Frankly, this is a huge gift to the council. You can let it die now. The city's shown overwhelmingly that they don't want this. A poll in the Fabulous Ferndale Forum last month showed that under 7% of the respondents, 273 total, didn't want this. There was one just ahead of the Baker Planning meeting on Wednesday, 347, it's 27% more respondents, and only 5.7% wanted it at that. And in my 3 months of coming to speak during these meetings regarding this project, I have yet to see a single citizen come up to speak in favor of this project. So we don't want it. It's a gift. Just let it die. Honestly, don't extend. Having said that, I also just wanted to speak quickly in regards to one of my neighbors named Ryan Mafasoli. He's on Lewiston Street, and just his house is in front of where the skate park's going to go. It's going to be 45 feet from his house. He's spoken to certain people with the city. He's done a lot of research. 12 other local city skate parks in our radius, and all of them are over 100 feet from the nearest house, and 11 of those 12 are over 200 feet away.
If I may, through the chair, it's on the agenda later. I want you to
Oh,
save your
perfect.
3 minutes.
Oh, okay, cool, party. So yeah, I think we should respect his right to privacy and quality of life, and I hope that is addressed. Thank you, good night.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor,
Good
Council. I would like to thank all of you for your service first and foremost.
What is your name?
I'm sorry, my name is Carl Scott.
Carl, nice to meet you.
Longtime resident, first-time caller, well, second. So I'd like to thank all of you for your service. I know that you do a difficult job. It doesn't really pay anything. I really thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I have been a resident of this city for 30 years, and I've seen a lot of changes. And, you know, if there's one thing that I would like to beseech you to keep in mind is that the city of Ferndale has consistently, you know, for the last 30 years at least, put its foot down that we are a place where predatory behavior against vulnerable individuals is not tolerated, period. And I just heard the new police chief come up, and, you know, that is exactly, that's Ferndale. You know, that's such a positive move. I mean, when I was a kid, I remember shady dealings and all that kind of stuff, and the fact that we're moving forward as a city is so wonderful. So if there's anything I would really like to beseech you to keep in mind, it's vulnerable people who, for instance, need access to the library, people who might take out an enormous loan that they can't afford on the promise of an education, and, you know, you're basically condemning them to a life of, you know, financial ruin. So I would just really like to, you know, urge you to keep those vulnerable people in mind. Not all of them are Ferndale residents. And throughout the city of Ferndale, we have been safe harbor for other people coming to Ferndale who are persecuted. And we need to continue to be that city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hello, I'm Brian Mully. Sorry for dressing like this.
We're informal.
Yeah, so I came out tonight to hear like what a successful Baker College would look like. And I was wondering if anyone wanted to comment on that, or where I can look for that information. I think that there are people online watching. So, and for everyone here, I'm wondering what a successful Baker College would look like for Ferndale.
I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but so what kind of information particularly are you looking for?
I'm wondering who would be living in the community, what it's going to do to businesses around it. Say there's an economic downturn, Baker might want to buy up more property, things like that.
Certainly all of those kinds of questions are part of the due diligence that we've been doing over the last 100 days, including, what is that? Including economic impact and quote-unquote benefit and those sort of things. And so we're gathering that information. I don't know how much of that lives on the website, but that is what's going to be the subject of the discussion as we get to the end of this sort of exploratory and negotiating phase.
Okay.
So, if there's a specific...
I think a lot of people came out today, though, to kind of look for answers on like what it's going to do to the community. And people are worried that it might have a big impact on the community.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's going into a very important place in the community, so people are wondering what the vision is. Maybe not so much for like the investors, but for the people that live in Ferndale.
Right.
So, I guess I'm wondering if you want to comment or...
In the spirit of filling some dead air through the chair.
Yeah.
The fact sheet there's a few copies back there.
Jordan, can you go up to the podium for the
yeah,
people at home?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to inconvenience you at all.
No.
This is part of the process. No, it's a good question. And that is admittedly a tricky part of this process in terms of quantifying all that stuff when it comes to numbers and specific performance is all predicated on the final scope of the project. However, online on the Baker Project website, which is ferndalemi.gov, I'm just speaking to the mic, sorry, I'm not trying to it's like a weird Seinfeld situation this creates. So what you'll find on ferndalemi.gov/projects/Baker, if you go to the right-hand side, you see all the key documents. If you look at the FAQ sheets and the community summaries, you'll see some of the high-level themes that we're advocating for. So again, and I recognize sort of the process, you're chafing at the process in terms of details, but you'll see the high-level themes of tax equivalence and support for the cost of city services that this would be projected to increase, local spend by the school and by the students on local businesses for things like catering and community sponsorships and things like community partnerships and scholarships and things like that. Those high-level themes are in there. Those are sort of the framework of the negotiation, but all those quantities are able to be tabulated when you know exactly what this project looks like, what kind of money is on the table, what form the project takes. But you can at least see the high-level themes that are framing the negotiation online. And again, my information's on there. I've got a stack of cards. I'm willing to hang out when we move beyond this from the agenda. I'll hang out there, hand my card out to anybody that wants to keep that conversation going. We also have a dedicated email. If you have specific questions, it's baker@ferndalemi.gov. So that's just there to make sure nothing gets lost. So happy to take those questions, but I hope that at least helps.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Cameron Brown from CrossFit HCS 160 Vester, and I wanted to talk about the trash compactor that is behind Como's, behind our building, and the White Heather Club. Last year in June, I contacted DPW about replacing that trash compactor. It is leaking from the bottom, and we see often in the morning that there are rats climbing up through the bottom of the compactor, getting food, obviously bringing it back to their home. So I contacted them. They informed me that I should use C-Click Fix, I think it's what it's called. And so I put my report on there and put the pictures on. About a month later, it says it was resolved. Nothing happened with the compactor. So then I take it to the forums, see if there's any other way to try to get some attention on this. I post some pictures about the leaking compactor. The trail of garbage goes down the alleyway for a while, and the smell leaks into our building, even with our garage bay closed and our door closed. So I go to the forums. That is on July 10th, and there's a big hoopla, as the forums do. And then it is brought to your attention, David, Mayor David Coulter, and we emailed. And you contacted DPW in your email. Still nothing happened. We still have the same compactor that is still leaking garbage down our alleyway. And the reason I'm bringing it up now is because in the summertime, it's really overpowering. And it fills our entire warehouse area. And I'm at a loss of what to do next.
So I'm gonna look at you, Joe, but should we get DPW back on this? Is this DDA? Is this us? How do we resolve this?
Yeah, actually, Mayor, I would be happy to connect you with our DPW director to make sure we talk about next steps, but also just taking a step back and looking at the compactor situation in downtown as it is. We have 4 compactors in 4 different areas servicing 4 quadrants of the downtown. So we are discussing during this budget process actually looking at a capital improvement plan in coordination with the DDA and the city and a mutual investment to update those compactors and look at what it looks like to maybe enclose those. So we're going to be engaging in the downtown sanitation plan.
Okay.
This summer, actually.
Timeline, is that before summer, end of summer?
So there's going to be an immediate, we can take immediate corrective actions right now to address the current situation, but I just wanted to communicate there's a long-term view and an understanding that downtown sanitation in general requires additional planning, and we're looking at that.
Mediations look like, and again, you guys
Sure.
can have a conversation off, but there are things we can do immediately.
I mean, I'd work through the DPW, and it really depends on the condition of the dumpster, but I mean, I think there's going to be a physical assessment of the dumpster to see if there's any, I don't know, for lack of a better term, vermin egress options. Right, so we'll do an actual physical assessment of the area, and then I think we'll work with the DDA to also just kind of look at what the users and the traffic looks like in terms of the dumpster, because that often is an issue as well.
That was something that was brought up. Cindy looked at it, and there was a lot of action taking place. We got some cameras that were put on it.
Yep.
Nearby businesses would actually take care of it, but from then on, it's still, as the compactor compresses, it leaks through the bottom, and that's creating more of the problem than the misuse of the compactor. So.
Absolutely, and I do believe the last report I got from the DPW is they're looking at pricing for replacing the compactors. And so I think they're already in the process of sourcing some pricing with Sakra, our hauler, our downtown hauler.
Okay.
But let's make sure we just keep the communications with you open as well, so I don't know if Joe, I know I have your email, I can give it to Joe, or you can make sure that we have it, just so we keep you sort of apprised of what's
Great.
happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
I do-
Also not a fan of Baker, so.
Thank you.
What is the name of your business? I never catch it when you
CrossFit HCS,
CrossFit HCS. Okay, I got it. All right.
the letters.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Appreciate you being here.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Barry Hicks.
Evening, Mayor and City Council members. I think the news kind of already came out and everybody knows this is my final week here in Ferndale as the Executive Director of the DDA. I think you've got great staff in place. It's going to be able to help you through that transition. I know I've been working with Joe on that plan a little bit too. He's been great helping us out. But yeah, I just wanted to come up and thank each and every one of you, as well as all the other staff at the city and my staff that I've been working with over the years, the DDA board I've been working with. It's been a real honor. It's been challenging at times, but it's been exciting too. And I know I've definitely learned a lot, and I hope that some of the things that I've been able to work on with you guys are going to last in the future and kind of lay the groundwork for things going forward with the DDA. So from the bottom of my heart, really thank you to all of you. I'm excited about the challenges coming up that I'm going to be facing my new position. I'll just be over in Madison Heights, so I didn't go very far, but I will certainly hope I see you guys around. And yeah, I just wanted to come up and say that. So
I was going to call you up because I knew this was your last week here, and maybe this isn't appropriate during public comment, but since this is your last meeting and I didn't call you up earlier, I do just want to express my and our appreciation to you. You stepped into a challenging role at a challenging time for our DDA, where there was, I would say, a lot of mistrust between the DDA and the city, some of the business owners that really needed to be focused on. There was a lot of questions about what's the direction of our downtown and what should we be focused on, the capital improvement plan that it had not been adopted, a myriad of issues. And you stepped into that. I don't even know, I wouldn't say eyes wide open, maybe half open. You maybe not even didn't realize. But I just want to give my heartfelt appreciation for the way that you've navigated that, the way you've strengthened the relationships between the DDA and not just the city, but lots of organizations and the community, and helped to provide a roadmap for our downtown development. So I want to thank you and wish you all the best in Madison Heights. I'm sure that they will be pleased with your services. So thank you, Barry.
thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. All right, is there anyone else that would like to address council this evening on items not on the agenda?
One quick question.
Yes, sir.
If you notice on weekends, this is something to think about, why you get more parking than you do in a week. Part of it's the weekend, but again, the parking's free. So you guys might want to consider, do we want to lower taxes and get more money poured into the city? Or do we want to keep raising the prices in parking, whether you guys realize it or not? For everything that gets raised in some form of passion either positively affects the community as a whole or it doesn't. Now, mind you, times in this country, though the economy supposedly says it's going strong, look at all the empty buildings we have in Ferndale. It could be filled with businesses, and look at all the open spots for a community center. That's what I was saying. If the officer is saying is true and crime's not that busy, take some of that and put it back in the community, get the kids off the streets, lower, all I'm saying benefits you guys. You guys can let it fly south, or you can listen to what I'm saying and seriously Because all it's going to do in the end is either benefit the city and its residents, or in the long run, as you notice, you already lost one resident who said that she was former, and ma'am, well done. I am a father of a guinea pig myself, and what you say is true.
Thank you.
So, one quick thing I didn't get a chance to say, and I'm asking for time since that guy came up 3 times. That project around the corner. Now, coming here, I cross that street. As you know, Ferndale's 80% bars, whatever. On a Friday night, if we can't access that sidewalk because you got construction and we end up having to, ride on the side on the street until we could get to the sidewalk and we get hit, it's going to happen 2 things. Either someone's going to get killed or someone's going to get sued. I understand what's going on there, but in the future, you might want to consider an alternative. Thank you for your time, and ma'am in the red coat.
Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council during public comment? All right, seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. Consent agenda is items that council considers routine and we enact in one motion unless something is pulled from the consent agenda, of which a couple already have been. And so let me read that now. Item A is the approval of the meeting minutes of March 25th, 2019. Item B is the approval of a contract number 195160 by and between the Michigan Department of Transportation and the City of Ferndale for asphalt reconstruction, resurfacing, concrete curb and gutter, drive approach, sidewalk ramps, drainage improvements, and structure adjustments, permanent signing, turf establishment, and pavement markings on Woodward Heights between Bermuda and Pilgrim. Item C is the approval of an interlocal agreement by and between the City of Hazel Park, the City of Pleasant Ridge, and the City of Ferndale for asphalt reconstruction, resurfacing, concrete, the same things, but between Bermuda and, on Woodward Heights between Bermuda and Pilgrim, and to authorize the mayor and finance director to execute the agreement. Item D is the approval of the Pleasant Ridge interlocal agreement for inspections. Item E is the approval to execute the engagement letter for Benzinski and Company, Municipal Finance Advisors. Item F is the approval to authorize the mayor to sign the Oakland County assessing agreement with the 1% increase in cost per year for 3 years to be taken from the account noted. Item G is the approval of the payment of the 2018-2019 Woodward Avenue Action Association membership dues in the amount of $3,125 from the account noted, and to authorize the mayor or his designees to represent the City of Ferndale on the WA3 Board of Directors. Item H is the approval of the payment of $3,450 to Bianco Tours for the summer Putnam Bay, Ohio trip, and charge it to the senior travel account as noted. Item I has been pulled from the agenda and added to the regular agenda. Item J is the approval of the backfilling of 1 firefighter position as submitted by the HR director. Item K is the approval of the backfilling of 1 DPW Grade 1 laborer position. Item L is the approval of the employee agreements as submitted by our HR director. Item M is the approval to authorize the appointment of Nadine R. Hatton as the magistrate for the Hazel Park Division of the 43rd District Court, as submitted by the Chief Judge of the District Court. Item N is the approval of the purchase of a mobile power washer for $12,090 and a stationary power washer for $3,900 from Atomic Cleaning Systems, and that the expense be charged to the General Fund Motor Pool Capital Outlay account as noted. Item O is the approval of the resolution proclaiming April 16th, 2019 as Education and Sharing Day in Ferndale. Item P is the approval of the bills and payroll as submitted by the City Manager's Office, subject to review by the Council Finance Committee. And finally, item R, item Q, as we noted before, has already been taken up. And item R is the approval to pay the outstanding taxes due and owing to the Oakland County Treasurer in the amount of $6,112.88 from the account noted, and to direct that the city assessment rolls be modified to indicate the property as being city-owned and tax-exempt, as submitted by our interim city managers. What is council's pleasure on the consent agenda this evening?
I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Support. So moved by Leaks May and supported by Martin. Now, any discussion? One that I would like to, and I'd like to invite the rabbi to come forward if you like, and his lovely wife, if she would like to join him as well. Because I know, Rabbi, you are the impetus behind the resolution proclaiming April 16th as Education and Sharing Day in Ferndale. We've done this in the past. We're proud to do it again. And maybe you can read it if you like. It's a relatively long resolution, but I certainly invite you to explain the importance and the meaning of it for our residents. If you
Okay, I would actually like to invite His Honor to read it. And
Oh.
to read it too.
You want me to read it and then you can
Please.
speak to it? I'd be happy to. All right. So at a regular meeting, the City Council of the City of Ferndale, held on this date in these chambers, the following resolution was moved and supported. A quality education can give every child, regardless of his or her circumstances, the opportunity to grow, thrive, succeed, and achieve their versions of the American dream. On Education and Sharing Day, we acknowledge the power that a solid academic foundation, combined with the transformative power of time-honored values and ethics, can have in helping young people achieve lives of purpose and passion. Today, we honor the life and legacy of Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. Am I pronouncing that right, Rabbi? Thank you. The Lubavitcher, thank you. Rebbe is a widely respected scholar and leader of faith who believed in the potential of all persons and sought to empower young people through education, character development, and civic pride. Throughout his long and distinguished life, the rabbi inspired millions of people across multiple generations through his example of compassion, wisdom, and courage in the face of oppression. He recognized that access to education, paired with moral and spiritual development, could transform the world for good, and he devoted his life to these principles. His commitment to invest in the lives of the next generation led to the establishment of academic and outreach centers to help grow and engage young minds and provide them with spiritual and material assistance. Thanks to his drive and dedication, these educational and social service centers can be found in every state and throughout the world. Say it again, Lubavitcher, thank you. Rebbe believed that even in the darkest place, quote, the light of a single candle can be seen far and wide. His life is an example of the power of one person to influence the lives of many. May we strive to be that light for future generations, instilling in them the value of education and the virtues of courage and compassion that can impact our communities and the world for the better.
We at Jewish Ferndale would like to thank the City Council, the Mayor, City Clerk, for adopting this resolution, making this proclamation, and understanding the value that education has. And we see, in the short time that Jewish Ferndale has been in Ferndale, the diversity and tolerance, and was mentioned here, the idea of taking care of the underdog, making sure that everybody has a fair shake, and that we want to recognize doesn't come in a vacuum, but is based on a very moral and explicit education, and this is what this resolution is trying to do. And we at Jewish Ferndale are in touch with the superintendent's office, and there will be programs throughout the city school-wide system to encourage this idea of education and sharing and recognizing moral values in education. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and let me I'll give you this as well. Thank you for once again bringing this to our attention. We appreciate it. Yes, Jared, Oh, I thought you were going to send me that picture. Carol will take it and she'll make sure you get it.
Absolutely.
Senator Aquarium.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much. Good to see you again. Oh, is it possible? Oh, okay. All right. Further discussion on the consent agenda. If not, Marnie, I need you to call the roll on the consent agenda.
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
Oh, yep, the motion was made by Leaks May and supported by Martin.
Mayor Pro Tem Polika?
Yes.
Councilmember Piana?
Yes.
Councilmember Leaks May?
Yes.
Councilmember Martin?
Yes.
And Mayor Coulter?
Yes, thank you. The consent agenda is adopted. Moving on now to the regular agenda. Item A is the consideration of the appointment of Zachary Mahalski and Carrie Funk to the Beautification Advisory Commission. I don't know if either of them are here. Oh, yeah, you want to come on up and just, I'd say introduce yourself. I think you have done that before, but reintroduce yourself and say hello and maybe just a little bit about your interest in serving.
My name is Zach Mahalski, 2851 Burdette. I relocated to Ferndale this past summer from the Saginaw Bay City area. And I was involved with my CDC, Citizens District Council, Riverfront Development, the Riverwalk, Parks and Recreation Committees in those towns. And so I saw that there were openings on a beautification commission, applied, and I am excited to be considered for the position.
Thanks. We're excited for your interest and willingness. Thank you. Any questions for him? No. Our liaison is, Dan, are you?
It's me.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
So you support these two positions,
Absolutely.
I assume?
Especially because he's from my hometown, apparently, Bay City.
Bay City?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
I,
Excellent. So you want to move it? Yep.
Move to confirm the appointment of Zach Mahalski and Carrie Funk to the Beautification Advisory Commission for a term ending December 31st, 2022.
Is there
Support.
Moved by Martin and supported by Pollock. Any further discussion? Marnie, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Piana?
Yes.
Councilmember Leaks May?
Yes.
Councilmember Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Polika?
Yes.
And Mayor Coulter?
Yes, thank you, and appreciate, again, your willingness to step up and serve. It's a great group, thank you, I think you'll enjoy it. Next item of business would be the consideration of the appointment of Kat Bruner James to the Civil Service Board. And I see Kat is in the audience. You want to come up and say hi and just share with us your interest? Good to see you.
I'm Kat Bruner James. I reside almost just one block over on Vester Street. I've been here for 17 years. I've been involved in primarily outside of official city business, Citizens for a Fair Ferndale, Ferndale and couple of short-term city projects, the master planning, or master land use plan, citizen committee, steering committee, I think it was, the city clerk's election task force about 2 years ago. And when I found out that there was a opening on the Civil Service Commission, I decided to apply for it because I think it sort of aligns with some of my professional obligations as well. I'm a civil rights attorney. I know a little bit about employment law as well. I am looking forward to serving the community. I think that my skills dovetail with this opportunity, and I appreciate your consideration.
And I would just add, I think you're being modest. You've been very involved. You've been very involved in a number of important things, including the Ferndale Inclusion Network and so many things. So we appreciate all that you've done. You're no stranger around here, and we appreciate it all, and appreciate you being willing to step into this role as well. Does anyone have any questions for Kat?
Thank you for serving.
Thank you for serving.
Thank you.
I move to confirm the appointment of Catherine Bruner James to the Civil Service Board for a term ending December 31st, 2024.
Support.
We all did.
Moved by Piana and supported by, I'm not sure who first. Okay, Paul.
Give it to Greg.
Paul, screaming for it. All right. Any final discussion, comments or questions? Marnie, would you call the roll? And thank you for staying around for 2 hours to do this. This is democracy. So, Marnie, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Leaks May?
Yes.
Councilmember Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Polika?
Absolutely, yes.
Councilmember Piana?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
And Mayor Coulter?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kat. Appreciate it. All right. Our next item of business is the consideration of the vacation of the easement in the vacated alley at 1201 Woodward Heights. And
Is that Jordan?
Jordan, are you doing that one? Yes. I know the memo came from Justin, but I don't see him this evening, so.
Apologize, I'm pinch hitting for Justin.
Yep, I know the memo came from him, but
Right. So, we have a couple of these. Pardon me. So my computer died. So.
Mine too. I'm using my cell phone.
So if you read the memo, council, sorry, I apologize for the technical snafu there. So again, 1201 Woodward Heights. This was a request to essentially vacate an easement that was initially part of an alley that was vacated to the city in 1947. So we typically reserve vacations for future utilities and right-of-way vacation approvals. Based on a survey and city records, there are not existing utilities in the vacated alley, and the area is not needed in the future. So normally, this is something we do with a lot of trepidation and under very specific circumstances. Those circumstances don't apply here. And so we've had city departments weigh in on this. And so essentially, we looked at this through our lenses of the departments. We find it to be okay and in keeping with advancing development in town. So we don't take any issue with it, and we recommend its approval.
If I could, through the chair, this is just setting the public.
Oh, that's right. I apologize.
So this proposed resolution would set the public hearing for the May 13th meeting and direct that the appropriate notice be provided, and there would be a public hearing at that time prior to consideration of a resolution to vacate the reserved easement.
The mayor has left, so I guess I'm
On the hook?
I'm on, yeah. I didn't even see him leave. So I guess I'll turn it to council. Any questions?
No, I'll make a motion to schedule the public hearing for Ferndale City Council meeting for May 13th, 2019, 7 p.m. at 300 East 9 Mile Road relative to vacating the portions of the easement in the vacated alley for the city of Ferndale, County of Oakland, State of Michigan, described as listed in the packet, and to direct the city clerk to publish the public hearing notice as required in the city charter.
Support.
moved by Martin, supported by Piana. I caught that, Greg, thank you. Further discussion.
Just for clarification, so this is where old Pete's Place used to be. And it's the space between the old parking lot and the empty lot. Is that correct? Going north and south?
With the only caveat that I apologize, I might be dating myself, I don't know what Old Pete's is.
Oh.
That being said.
It's the abandoned building that used to be Pete's Place.
Okay, that I'm more familiar with, and yes, that is correct.
Where Anita's Kitchen was.
That's correct, yes. That's right, that's right. Yes. Now we're on the same page.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Marnie, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Polika?
Yes.
Councilmember Piana?
Yes.
Councilmember Leaks May?
Yes.
And Mayor Coulter?
Yes, thank you. That item is
Thank you,
adopted.
Council.
Next item of business. I'm sorry, Ryan, you're down all the way to the end of you're getting some real democracy here tonight. All right. Item D is the consideration to adopt amendments to the fiscal year 2019 budget to comply with Section 17 PA 621, the Uniform Budgeting and Accounting Act. And Cheryl, our Director of Finance, you're going to introduce that item, please?
Good evening. This is kind of just a formality. We're doing some budget changes, moving some things around in some of the accounts. One of the biggest changes that you'll see when you look through this document is we did receive a $600,000 grant for the MIDC for the Michigan Indigent Defense Fund. And so some of the laws have changed around the state for that, so we did receive that money and we've budgeted for it. And it's also paying for significantly more attorney fees and some capital changes that were made in the police department so that there are more privacy options for prisoners. That's the biggest piece of the changes. There were some people that left, so we've got some money moving around, changing some of the positions, and some of the buyouts were pretty significant. So it's money coming off the balance sheet that you'll see expenses for, and that's the bulk of the changes. You'll see, I'll bring another change when we shore up the year in June.
My only question, Cheryl, is I'm used to doing mid-year adjustments in December. Are we are we just late, or can these be any time of the year? We just call them mid-year, and we could be any time, or just from a process standpoint?
The process is a little sloppy, admittedly. Part of what we do is we do this with the budget process. And it's when we're all together having these conversations, so it's usually the first time that we do a big change like this. So we just haven't had the time to bring it back to council. We've just been doing other things.
Okay. Fair enough. Straightforward answer. I appreciate that. But typically, we would expect to see
Mayor.
these like in December-ish, right?
If I may, typically in one of our goals, you'll see at the next council meeting a budget presentation that's going to show you what the budget year looks like and where the mid-year adjustment fits in that process. And the objective would be a 6-month update in January.
Through the chair,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be mid-year, any material
Right,
change.
any material, we could do any time. Yeah,
Correct.
no, and I get that, and I appreciate that, yeah. So, thank you. Other questions or a motion?
I'll move to adopt the changes to the fiscal year ending 2019 budget to comply with Section 17 of PA 621, the Uniform Budgeting and Accounting Act.
Support.
Moved by Martin, supported by Piana. Any further discussion or questions? All right, Marty, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Polika?
Yes.
Councilmember Piana?
Yes.
Councilmember Leaks May? Should I stop the budget? Yes. Councilmember Martin?
Yes.
And Mayor Coulter?
Yes, thank you. That item is adopted. Now, moving on to item E is the consideration to accept and receive the draft triennial budget for fiscal years 2020 to 2022. Joe?
Mayor and Council, I will introduce this item. So the city charter requires that the city manager present a first draft of the budget that's being proposed for the ensuing fiscal year. And so tonight is the culmination of that first draft reading. The charter then requires that we bring that budget back for a public hearing for final budget adoption, the final council meeting in April. And so tonight's the first step in that process. At the next council meeting, you will see a formal presentation that summarizes the fiscal 20 through 22 budget highlights that we discussed. And we did meet with City Council at 2 public budget workshops in March. And so we discussed at the first one, general fund, and we discussed at the second one, special revenue funds. And I apologize for my voice, I'm like 5 octaves lower than I normally am.
No, it's very, you've got a radio voice going on tonight. Thank you, yes. What about the DDA budget, which I know comes to us as well? When does that come, and what should we,
The DDA budget is also considered, they're considered a component government, and they're required to submit their budget for council approval. They will be submitting for approval on the next council meeting, which is April 22nd. They're actually presenting to their board this Thursday at their monthly board meeting, which is scheduled for April 11th at 8 a.m.
And then finally, will this budget be posted on our website for residents to see and look over before we adopt it next time?
Absolutely. This budget is currently in the public packet, and the formal budget, once it's adopted, the charter actually requires that we publish a adopted budget book and place that at all public municipal locations, and including the city's website.
Excellent.
With the draft of the budget, we started putting hard copies at the library. Can we do that as well?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And through the chair, I have a question too. Can you accompany this budget with the budget presentation? Like the budget presentation always accompanies this document when you post it on our agenda as a reference document, so that people who come along the way see that we actually have priorities and that we're aligning this budget with actual mindfulness and thoughtful processes going forward.
Absolutely. So we will certainly have the presentation that will be provided at the 22nd meeting associated with the final budget draft that's being presented to the council in the packet, for sure.
Is there a motion?
I move to receive the draft fiscal year ending 2020 to 2022 budget for review in preparation for formal budget adoption on April 22nd, 2019.
Support.
Moved by Polika and supported by Martin. Any Other comments or questions?
Just to continue on Councilwoman Piana's comments, will your presentation also include the connection between those changes within the budget, the things that we're highlighting, to our master plan?
Yeah, so we seek to align all budget investments with City Council's master land use plan approval and the city, which was just revisited in March as well. So you'll be seeing a published final document of that as well.
Okay, thank you.
And will we see an updated strategic plan before the budget? Well, from the session with.
The facilitator is finalizing the draft output
Okay.
right now. So we would expect to, once that's finalized, to have that accompanying, since that's considered a financial planning document as well.
Okay, so we're going to see the first draft of that presentation from the strategic planning session at the time we actually have to vote on the budget?
Mind you, these current budget priorities reflect the city's initial two-year biennial strategic planning update, and this strategic plan is part of the consideration of our triennial, if that makes sense. I know that's biennial and triennial, but we adopt a three-year budget, so that means we budget 3 years out for typical budget processes and 5 years out for capital. And so City Council's biannual strategic planning session fits within that planning period.
Okay, I just make sure that it's clear in your presentation where there's differences from what we've done in the past strategic plan.
Sure.
And where there's new elements that were identified that we need to take in consideration in our budget, and just make sure that that's highlighted. Because there were some key priorities that were shifted, and I just want to make sure that we're very clear in the budget presentation what those are. Does that make sense?
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
So it's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Marnie, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Leaks May?
Yes.
Councilmember Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Polika?
Yes.
Councilmember Piana?
Yes.
And Mayor Coulter?
Yes, thank you. That item is adopted. Moving on to item F is a consideration for the mayor and city clerk to sign the resolution authorizing the issuance of the second series of general obligation unlimited tax bonds for road bonds for $15 million.
Good evening.
And just because I sign it doesn't mean I'm personally responsible, right?
Let's talk.
Say no.
No. I don't know. I'd have to defer to Katrina. This is Katrina from Miller Campfield.
Thank you. Yep.
So this is the second series of the road and park bonds.
Yeah.
This is the piece that's going to be all roads. It's $15 million. And by you signing the resolution, we're just going to move forward with the second series of bonds for $15 million. And we should have the funds by the end of June.
Excellent. Anything to add since you've stayed with us?
Yeah, I really couldn't have said that better. This authorizes the city to take action and do a competitive sale for the bond issue, and the bonds will be awarded based on the lowest interest cost, and it authorizes, Joe and the officers to complete the process, the bonding process.
Where do we see the market as compared to the last time we issued bonds, for the road bonds? I mean, I know that's an economic question versus a legal one, but.
No, it's a good question. So 2016 interest rates were very low in 2016. They've creeped up a small amount, but interest rates, historically speaking, are still quite low.
Yeah.
And actually, I do know that when we projected this out in 16, we anticipated the interest rates to be about 5.5%, and they're a little bit lower than that right now.
Yeah.
So you'll see a reduction in that from when we originally planned on this series going out.
That was my question. Thank you. All right. Is there a motion?
I move the city of Ferndale authorize the issuance of $15 million in unlimited tax general obligation bonds, Series 2019, as stated in the attached resolution.
Support.
All right, it's been moved and supported. Any further discussion or questions? All right, Marnie, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Polika?
Yes.
Councilmember Piana?
Yes.
Councilmember Leaks May?
Yes.
And Mayor Coulter?
Yes, thank you. That item is adopted. Moving on to item G is the consideration of the dot bid award recommendation.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, this is the fourth in a series of bid recommendations for a substantial publicly funded project.
Yes.
While there are no small parts or small actors, these are just the smaller contracts that took a little bit longer to negotiate, so you'll notice that in the, comparatively speaking, against the previous that were between $2 to $3 million of work for concrete, steel. There's just some smaller items that we had to negotiate.
Any questions?
How many more of these do we expect to get?
I got a question.
I'm sorry, this is not public comment time,
It's
so
about the sidewalk thing she's
Yep.
talking about. And it
We're on a
has
diff-
a lot to do with my issue that I brought up.
I appreciate it. We're on a different subject right now, sir, okay?
I asked our construction manager to report on that, and they believe these are the final contracts.
Oh,
This
okay.
wraps it up.
Great.
All right.
I had a question on some of the contractors. Some were listed as non-union and union, but some have no union by them. For example, which one is it? The painting bid package. Continental says non-union, but the others don't have any indication if they're union or non-union. And if I go up to another listing, some say, for example, landscaping bid package, all of them have union or non-union next to their names. So I think that was an oversight on Colasanti's part.
You want to address that, Joe?
Yeah, I can verify that with Colasanti. My guess is if there's that recommendation, the summary, then that just might be a technical error, a clerical error on their end. But the award recommendations that they put forward are all union.
Are they? Okay, I just want to make that clarification. So if you could please direct them for future, I guess this is the last bid package. So, yeah, but thank you for clarifying.
So a motion would be in order.
I move to approve of the bid award recommendations valued at $956,891 to be paid from the auto parking fund.
Support.
All right. Is there any discussion or questions, comments on this item? Marty, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Polika?
Yes.
Councilmember Piana?
Yes.
Councilmember Leaks May?
Yes.
Councilmember Martin?
Yes.
And Mayor Coulter?
Yes, thank you. That item is adopted. Moving on now to item H, which was added at the beginning of this meeting, is around the skate park and an update, and who's going to present that?
Yeah, Mayor, Council, I will gladly introduce that. We've been working with Parks and Recreation Director Lorena Wheaton in response to some recent updated rounds of community engagement around the location of the skate park. And I'd like to commend Lorena for working with the contractors who are already committed to that project site. They worked throughout the weekend on some alternatives, and we're here to present an alternative recommendation for council to consider. And I am able to pull that up as well.
All right.
So the relocation recommendation you'll find in a packet that will be posted to accompany this includes some identification of rationale for the relocation under the section of trade-offs. And that location looks to move the skate park from north of the walnut trees to south of the walnut trees as depicted in this draft sketch.
Forgive me if I'm jumping ahead, but the move also saves some of the mature trees that were otherwise slated to be destroyed, correct?
We do believe it does, yes. The mature walnut trees.
So would you just sort of walk us through this diagram, please?
Yeah, actually, I'll go ahead and invite Lorena if you want to help walk through the programming.
Yeah, I don't know if you have a.
The initial location. walnut trees that were discussed.
Okay, so north of the walnut tree, so basically if you sort of flip the skate park design, it was originally located there on the northeast end and encompassed the walnut trees. And so now we moved it down to the other side within that footprint of where the community gathering space was once located.
Yeah.
Creating that would be more so tying into the entrance directly into Geary Park from like the downtown area or Pinecrest and Earl. Yep.
Okay.
One of the advantages of the new location is, and keep me honest, Joe, is in this current location, we're at least 100 feet from any other property line, correct?
That is correct.
Or not 100 feet, 1,000 feet, I'm sorry.
1,000?
100.
From the structure.
Including the people across the street on Pinecrest, I assume.
Yeah, so here in the packet, we enumerated kind of 4 benefits of considering this relocation. So one, as we've already mentioned, it preserves the old walnut trees. 2, it looks to preserve the 100-foot setback that's been of interest around adjacent properties, private properties. And it was also considered as one of the 3 site recommendations during their community engagement process.
So I commend you. I appreciate the work that you've taken to work with the residents and the neighbors. What was going to be in this spot, in this space that you're moving it to, and what are the ramifications of that, just in terms of the...
Sure. So in this area, the community gathering space with the associated pavilion, we were relocating the pavilion from the fence line, along the fence line in the middle of the park, away from the property line into this area. So that was, again, part of the community gathering space. So that would be impacted. So we would need to find out how we're going to either incorporate the community gathering space, relocate it, as well as the pavilion.
Okay.
I believe there was a commemoration to Mayor Coulter going in there, but we just ripped that right out.
Thank you. All right. So I guess before council starts to weigh in, I'll ask if there's anyone here from the audience because that would like to address this item on the agenda. Anyone who's been patiently waiting?
Yeah, one quick question. This is all cool, but where is this park at? Is it the park right by the Taco Bell and 9?
No, sir. This is at Pinecrest, north of 9 Mile Road.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
On the northwest quadrant of town.
I'm thinking, looking at it, I'm like park, 7-Eleven.
Yep.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time again.
You're welcome.
If you have a minute when this is wrapped, I'd like at least 2 minutes of your time. I'll talk as quick as I can. You'll find me logical. And to listen is to understand, and to understand is to listen.
Thank you. Good evening.
My name is Ryan Maffesoli. I live at 2131 Pinecrest, which touchscreen is right there, up at the top. So I wanted to say thank you for the council's effort and Lorena's effort in working with this and trying to find a new location. Originally, the plans were about 45 feet from my home, and since my home isn't aligned like every other house along Lewiston, where it's the back of a lot with a garage and space, it was going to be basically broadside to my entire home, and basically every room would be within earshot and sight. So I definitely appreciate the consideration in the very short term. So.
Thank you.
I'd like to add, Ryan is one of the most detailed residents I've seen come in prepared with his drawings. So after this is all settled, we need to snag him for a commission or something because you've
right?
There's a lot of talent there, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Sharon.
Hi, I'm Sharon Chass. And I wanted to address earlier, there's been residents that had said what a deficit it will be to their home values. And David and I had a property go up for lease on the corner of Pinecrest and Breckenridge. And we found that to be the complete opposite. People were so excited that we were investing in the park. Bringing a skate park too was just like a wow moment. So we were very encouraged that you guys are moving in the right direction. And Lorena has just put in an incredible amount of time and due diligence and paid respect to every voice she's heard. And I appreciate what she's done. And I look forward to all of this coming to fruition in the next couple of years. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Anyone else from the public like to address us on this issue? All right, council, any comments or questions you have?
No, I'd just like to encourage your support. There's a lot of work over the weekend to accommodate this, and I think it's a good solution, and I think it still builds on the recommendations that we previously received, and gives us I think a model for more neighbor engagement moving forward. So I'd encourage your support.
Through the chair, I really wanted to acknowledge we got a memorandum here, and it's, I believe, online as well. And it's a summary of the community engagement in Geary Park. And I just appreciate the overview of what's been going on in this past year. But I also want to remind residents that this is part 3 of a 1.5 long conversation about the skate park. And that the city council and city staff have actually listened to residents over time through the park's planning process of not only what amenities we need in the park, and highest surveys came around the skate park, and that a community residents came together and actually created a pro skate park Facebook page saying that they wanted a skate park in our community, and reinforced that that investment should be made a priority on behalf of council in our budgeting process. And so through our residents' engagement, through our Parks and Planning Commission, they identified that let's look at Wilson Park for the skate park. And the city went through a 6 to 8 month engagement process with Wilson Park and heard from residents there about pros and cons of that park. And the city said, you know what? We heard the residents of Ferndale, and we're going to reconsider another park to put this in, and went through another long 6 to 8 month process of engaging residents around that park to install this investment. And so I just wanted to say that we do listen to residents, and we take it very seriously, and we are very mindful about this. While we don't always get it right, what you can guarantee from us is that we're going to try and do continuous improvement and make it right. And we do that by having engaged residents within this process. And I just wanted to say thank you for the residents who have been paying attention and involving. I know getting outside of your day-to-day activities to come to meetings is hard. And so I just wanted to say thank you for participating in all the various ways that we seek to do input. And that the city staff and the city council is always open to new ideas of how to better engage our residents as new tools come online and new ways of, residents say this works better for us. We explore it and figure it out. So thank you for your patience, for those who've been waiting for the skate park, and thank you for the patience for the residents who expressed concerns like, hey, there's some issues with this design. Let's walk through it together. So I appreciate Resident Ryan for being that involved voice. So thank you. I support all of this.
All right. Other comments, questions?
I'd like to move to modify the proposed location of the skate park to be constructed at Geary Park. Resolved that the skate park be constructed further south from the location depicted in the diagram attached to the Council February 11th, 2019 agenda item approving Geary Park as the location of the skate park, and that the skate park be moved closer to the southeast corner of Geary Park so that it is to be located not less than 100 feet from the residential principal structure as depicted in the attached diagram.
Support.
All right. Moved by Martin and supported by Pollock. Final discussions, comments, or questions? All right, Marty, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Piana?
Yes.
Councilmember Leaks May?
Yes.
Councilmember Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Polika?
Yes.
And Mayor Coulter?
Yes, thank you. That item is adopted. Thank you, folks. Great. Item I is the Dream Cruise contract, and Councilman or Mayor Pro Tem Polika, you pulled that from the consent agenda?
I did. And as some people know, I am an employee of Ford Motor Company. and I try to recuse myself from voting on issues that either financially benefit Ford Motor Company or the city through that direct agreement. And this is one of those instances where I will be recusing myself.
Thank you.
Doesn't happen often, but.
Yeah. No, I appreciate your integrity in noticing that. So with that, a motion would be in order by non-Ford employees.
Hang on, let me go back up to I.
Oh, except you got to go back up to the I.
Yeah, sorry. I move to authorize the attached 2019 Ferndale Dream Cruise sponsorship agreement between the City of Ferndale and GTP Agency, LLC, as agent for Ford Motor Company, and authorize the mayor's signature as submitted by the Director of Special Events.
Support.
All right, moved by Piana, supported by Leaks May. So any additional comments or questions on this item? Marnie, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Leaks May? Yes. Councilmember Martin?
Yes.
Councilmember Piana?
Yes.
And Mayor Coulter?
Yes, thank you. That item is adopted, and that concludes our regular agenda this evening. Next item of business would be the call to council. Chief Palazzo, anything for the good of the community? No. How about from the fire department this evening? Nothing. Dan from the DPW?
One is the 2019 paving improvement letter went out. That will accompany another letter with the closer start date. So if your street is getting done, you will get a letter prior to that letting you know, hey, construction is going to be done 7 a.m., 7 p.m. You can move your cars back in after that time and so on. Two, in the northeast and northwest quadrants of the city, there are little A's, B's, and C's spray painted in white on slabs of sidewalk. That is for the sidewalk improvement. Residents will be receiving a notice soon if they do have spray paint on one of their flags. If they would like to understand why that spray paint is on there, they can give us a call at the DPW.
Is that degree of damage ABC or?
Yeah, it's just pitting, if it's a trip hazard, if we do a saw cut, something along those lines, so on and so forth. And then two, we do have compost at the yard, 521 East Camborne. If anyone wants that, we will be getting that out into the parks fairly soon.
Excellent.
And the last one I got is the dump truck with a salt body that you approved last January just came in on Friday. So just got a couple tweaks and stuff like that to do to it. We will be able to use it for outside of just salt for some of our bulk carrying, so which is a good thing. So we're excited to get to play with that. So if you want to see it, it's at the yard right now.
Can I drive it? No.
You can ride.
Probably.
If you got a CDO, you could drive, you know.
So I'll crash it.
Through the chair, Dan, I heard anecdotally through someone that was petitioning DPW to help move a public art structure. One of our trucks is down. Is that true?
I don't know what's in the garage right now, to be quite honest with you. We have stuff that goes in and out. But I know that big truck that we do use to move things like that, moving our logs and stuff like that. Maybe something hydraulic or something like that on it. It's an older truck. It is one of our budget requests for the coming fiscal years for capital. I can't speak on that.
If you or somebody want to give me a call tomorrow, I'll give you the details.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I just don't know about that truck.
Okay.
Cool.
Through the chair?
Yes.
So I noticed that the Sweet Sweeper is out to play. And because we don't notify any of the streets when they're going to be coming down, cars are generally gone around, so the street doesn't get completely cleaned. So will there be additional visits? Because I would say half of my street has been swept because cars are parked in places that.
Oh, no, absolutely. The street sweeping is something that we're not just going to do during the spring. That's going to be until we can no longer street sweep. One of the things that we found was that while we were going out in the past, and this is prior to me being here, but putting out signs and let residents know, try to get off the street, we were taking almost too much time trying to play catch up on getting to the next street and so on. So that's why you do see us going around the cars. We do come in early in the morning to do some of our major streets. But all the streets are getting 2-3 passes to begin with, and then that'll just be kept up throughout until we get into the fall and leaves are heavy.
Yeah. I did notice that Friday, they were, I would say, 4 times came back and forth, which was nice, but again, there was cars all over, so not the whole thing. I also am glad to hear that you're doing it more than just in the spring, because I think in the past, well, in the distant past, we used to do it all summer long. Spring and summer, and then it stopped, and we were just doing it once or twice in the spring, and then once in the fall, and that was it.
And that's what I was gonna ask you. So when, you know, I mean, and I know there's not a set schedule like we do with snow plowing and that sort of thing, but, you know, when, after this initial blast of 3 or 4 times on your street or whatever it is, how often should residents expect to see it in their neighborhood? Just kind of a rough estimate.
Every few weeks, it really depends on how it's looking out there. If we've had a lot of rain, getting debris in the gutter and stuff like that, or if you got a contractor that's kind of caused some debris to build up and stuff like that. It really depends on what the workload is, and you know, if we're getting a lot of rain, then we're in the parks more mowing and stuff like that. So it's juggling it all.
Okay. Because it really does make a difference when when you've gone through. So, but I appreciate it's balanced against other jobs that you have. But thank you. Okay. Recreation, and is that going to be it? She's going to. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, good evening. I'll try to be quick. We have a handful of upcoming events and programs coming up. The most notable of which is probably our extravaganza event, which will be this Saturday, April 13th. It'll take place at 5 different parks throughout the city of Ferndale at 5 different staggered times, giving residents and members of the community an opportunity to either walk to their local park or to travel along and go to all of the parks. Those parks are Marie Tot Lot at 12:30, Wilson Park at 1 o'clock, Garbutt Park at 1:30, Geary Park at 2 o'clock, and Martin Rowe Park at 2:30. We also have been generously donated a number of different Easter baskets, and I hesitate to call some of these Easter baskets because of the complexity of some of them.
Please, Chief, looking pretty confident back there.
But we have a number of different Easter baskets that were donated by various organizations and departments and people, including City Council, which is...
I know, you got me sheepish now. Who's working on ours? How's ours coming along?
I think the city manager's office is going to have some late additions this week.
There's still time.
So...
Myers is open 24/7.
You can delegate that, Joe, by the way.
So I want to stress that this is a completely free event to the public, so bring all your kids out and just have a great time. The Easter baskets will be given out based on golden tickets that are within a handful of eggs at the different sites. So yeah, that's pretty much summarizes that. Other than that, we have summer camp that is registration is up and rolling. We already have 15 spots taken up in our first week. I want to remind the public that the early registration discount for that ends on May 10th, which is a $10 discount for any session that you pay for prior to that date. We also have a mom-to-mom sale coming up on Saturday, April 26th, and we have is that Saturday? Yeah. And the same, okay, so, and we also have a free Arbor Day training on April 27th at the Kulik Center at 10 o'clock. There'll be a session where we discuss different ways and great ways to plant trees and take care of trees and things like that. Yep.
Excellent. Any questions
Through the chair.
Yeah.
You brought up Arbor Day. Are we going to have a tree planting, as we always do, in Oppenheim Park? Our Tree City USA Park?
So, we're working on that now, but I believe it's at Wanda this year.
So, yeah, I got to speak into the microphone, right?
Yes, please.
She said we're working on it right now, but it's we're thinking that it's going to be a Wanda Park this year rather than Oppenheimer.
Okay.
Okay. Good. We'll look forward to that. Yeah.
Cool.
Is there a rain date for the extravaganza?
So the question was if we have a rain day for extravaganza, and at this point, no. As far as I believe that we can run the program rain or shine, but let's hope that we don't have to worry about that.
Well, it takes all but, what, less than 10 minutes by the time you set the kids free,
Yeah,
right?
I know. Oh my God,
Or
10?
just a sentence.
2
I mean,
minutes.
Right.
2 minutes
If
and it's
that.
done.
Snip them out.
If that. So,
Thank you,
yeah.
appreciate it. All
They
right.
can't clean their rooms, but they can find all those eggs.
Dan, anything from HR this evening? All right. Cheryl, anything else from finance? Jordan, anything else from community and economic development? All right. Kara, anything from community engagement?
Nothing this evening.
All right. Marnie from the clerk's office?
Nothing, thank you.
Oh, wow. Okay, Joe, anything from city manager's office?
I do want to offer just some final thoughts, reflecting on how busy we were this weekend as a staff. So I really want to just say, shout out to public service, and specifically we had, our DPW staff did an excellent job responding to a surprise water main break. These things happen, but when they happen on weekends, I love to see our DPW and our water department get out there and address the problem and stay in constant communication with our communications department. So next up will be our communications department. That's a 24/7 job, especially in local government right now, and I don't know that we always acknowledge that. So I wanted to take time to acknowledge, always being available 24/7. On our Parks and Rec, looking at our Parks and Rec department, just the responsiveness of doing the work to make sure that we were able to respond and respond in time with the thoughtful solution is just hats off to everybody. HR deals with people, so this is like a Emmy award exception speech, but really, honestly, the work is outstanding. Our police and fire obviously are always on the clock, and so I just don't know that our office takes time to just shout that out, and I wanted to make sure to do that today.
Well said and true. Thank you, Joe.
Through the chair,
Yes.
you mentioned the water main break. So has that delayed the project? And if so, do we have an estimate?
Too soon to tell at this point, but Colasanti was very good about getting out there and getting pumps in to remove the water on a Sunday. So their goal was to continue to move forward with foundations this week without disruption. What the soil looks like down there, I'm not sure, but they expect to report back by the end of the week on if there's any course corrections.
Great, thank you.
Dan?
Nothing tonight.
All right. Councilman Martin?
No, I was just going to second what Joe said, but when I had thought it in my mind, it was the first time. I really appreciate, there were a lot of moving parts this weekend, and staff and vendors were really quite responsive. So I just want to thank everybody. It was a lot of effort on a lot of fronts this weekend, and I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Councilwoman Lee May?
Yes, I just want to send, he's gone now, but I wanted to tell Barry, thank you for all of his service, and Madison Heights will be lucky to have him. Also, I wanted to actually thank you, Mayor Coulter, and you, Dan Martin, Councilman Martin, for negotiating the park, and for you, Ryan, for bringing it forward. So we try to get things right every now and again, so thank you for stepping up and being just a logical, reasonable voice, and I'm glad that our Department of Recs Director Lorena and her team, and you all were able to come to a consensus. So, and bless you. Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. Councilwoman Piana?
Yeah, I just wanted to request sort of a review from the city manager's office and the DPW on our C-Click Fix tool. It's been a while since we had an update on how that is working and what the metrics are. And I bring that up because of the business owner who came today to address the compactor. One thing in particular that drew my attention was that he said when he called DPW redirected him to go lodge the complaint on C-Click Fix, and I was under the impression that DPW, when they receive a complaint, were to go and enter it. And so I just wanted to understand what the customer service approach is on this, because now we've made a resident who called and complained, and then we said, sorry, calling isn't the right way to lodge that complaint. We need you to go actually enter it into C-Click Fix. And I think that's a little backwards, and I'm not sure if that's really what happened or not, but that's what I heard today, and which is drawing me to ask this request. And how is it working? How quickly are people getting responded to and closing out? And is there a gap of information between closing out an issue via staff via what a resident needs to know. I just know these are ongoing issues that cities have using with C-Clip Fix. It's not endemic to anything that Ferndale is doing. It's just part of city business, right? And so I would request an update and sort of a summary of where we are with C-Click Fix. And then moving on, did you want to respond to that?
I could just comment on that, and I think we'd be happy to report out on just issues and metrics and just generally how C-Click Fix has worked in the coming city council's work with the clerk and getting that on the agenda tracker. Specifically to the intent behind the tool, it was intended to be used as just a customer service record. So essentially if the city staff do receive a call, we have a tool that allows us to enter the ticket on behalf of the person, educate them that this tool is out there if they wish to use it, but we certainly are able and certainly willing to enter on behalf of people with the goal of just actually helping us track issues and manage issues.
Okay, so maybe there's a different set of expectations between resident of how the tool is supposed to be used and how we're using it, and maybe that needs to be a point of education and communication focus. And then I just wanted to say about the trees in Geary Park. I think there's been some misinformation put out there unintentionally on Geary Park because trees and their removal, I understand, is emotional response because we all love our trees. I love my trees, which is why I've been on the Ferndale Environmental Sustainability Commission working to improve our tree program, which I'm really proud of. Definitely has some areas for improvements, but where we were 4 years ago of not having any idea the health of our trees in our public right-of-way to having a pinpoint GIS tracker of a tree on a street is really an advancement in our capabilities of managing this valuable and lovable resource on behalf of our residents. But I wanted to say with Geary Park, unfortunately, there are trees that are dying there, and they're in really poor condition. And while I hate removing a tree just as much as everybody else, we are making sure we're replanting, and that I had through CARA via Parks Commission or Parks Department that Geary Park has 179 trees, and over a two-phase period, apparently 39. I think these numbers shifted with the recent adjustment of Geary Park, but 22% of those trees are planned for removal over 2 phases, but we're replanting double. And we're planting 125 new trees, which takes the park up to a total of 265 trees over time, which is a 48% increase in trees in the park, which is all about providing tree growth and urban forestry for our future generation, because we didn't have a plan to make that happen for them, and now we do. So we're making sure our parks and our trees are there to serve the millennials children that are just being born in Gen Z or Y, whatever they're called, that their children are going to be able to go into that park and have shade because trees die, and it's a really sad thing when they do, or they fall over in bad storms. So I just wanted to say that I'm really happy that this program is in place and that we try to eliminate the removal of healthy trees wherever possible. So 48% increase in new trees in Geary Park. Excellent. And then finally, I just wanted to share my perspective on my sense of civility going on. I brought it up at the last meeting that I would like to take a look at bringing in the Civility Institute through my role through the Michigan Municipal League. And I know there's a lot of change happening right now in our community. Some approved by the community of improving our parks through a bond, some through the private market with new development coming. And then, the desire of the city council and city staff to make sure that we're improving our community in the best possible way that increases the quality of life for our residents, and that businesses have the best opportunity to make a living and doing what they love doing best. And that this change we're going through is, we need to have honest and personal relationship building and conversations. And when we tear down one another and when we use attacks against one another, this does not lead to productive and healthy communities. And so I urge residents who may question our policies, may question our decisions, and you absolutely have the right to do that. I do that with my own representatives and my state senator and state reps, and so it's absolutely right to do that. But if we divulge into behavior that tears each other down, that is a reflection of who we are in our community. And if we start honoring that and championing that those people who behave poorly is a way that we're going to honor getting things done in our community, then we just become as bad as that that behavior that has been presented. And so I just encourage everybody to be mindful of their language and be oh gosh, it's late. The word's not coming. Courteous, thank you. Be courteous and mindful and thoughtful, and that your elected officials didn't get into this to undermine community. We did it because we have a passion and a love in making our community better. And so we come at this from a positive aspect, and I always have for the 10 years I've been on council. And so I am here. When people call me and want to be a part and have a conversation, you know what? I take wine over to people's houses and sit on their porch and have those hard conversations. I just went to a resident's house to have coffee to talk about Baker College. Why? Because they've asked and they invited me there. And that's what I do as a councilwoman, to make sure that I'm hearing the concerns and that you hear what I am looking at whenever we entertain an opportunity. So just want to be very mindful that this is, civility is really important and how we treat each other. So that's what I'm going forward, and I call to action residents who see poor behavior, mean-spirited behavior, to call it out and say, hey, we do better in Ferndale. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Polika.
So Melanie beat me to the C-click fix conversation.
Great minds think alike.
Always. But I would like to add, because I don't, at least I'm not aware that we have a policy of how we utilize it across the entire city, like almost an instruction manual. The other point that I want to make is that, it is getting late, is when, because I use it a lot, and I'll report something, for example, the flags on Woodward needed to be replaced because they were all tattered, or I see a light switch that needs to be replaced, or a sidewalk that is just really needs to be attended to. I take a picture, I submit it, it goes through the process, and then I get the automated message that says, your issue has been resolved. But then I have to make sure that I go see that the flag's actually been changed, or that the light switch has been changed, or that the sidewalk has been changed, when it could have easily been a photo taken by whoever repaired it and added it onto the issue so that you know immediately and there's complete closure. So that's the only thing that I ask that we move forward with in C-Click Fix. Thank you.
All right. I guess I just have one item this evening, and that is that a week from tomorrow, Tuesday, April 16th, I'll do my annual State of the City address, and we're going to do that from Rust Belt Market this year at 7 p.m., so it's free and open to the public. I think we'll also be streaming it live on Facebook, right, Kara? So you can watch from the comfort of your home if you're so inclined. It's only about, what, 3 hours long, Kara? So, kidding.
I won't be able to make it.
Kidding. Short, brief, but hopefully, a nice summary of where we've been for the last year and what's up with the city. So if you can make it, tune in or join us at Rust Belt Market at 7 o'clock next Tuesday. And with that, our meeting is adjourned.